So fire away. Ask anything. I did pour myself a drink. So.
What are you drinking? Oh, you actually are in the sauna, Eric.
I am. Yeah. I am.
What are you drinking?
This is a Speyside Scotch.
Let's see.
Yeah.
What is it?
A Speyside Glenlivet. I don't know if you could read that. It's actually a really nice bottle.
Nice.
It's only about $30, and it might be one of the best I've ever had. Not that I drink a lot of Scotch, but it's real clean, real smooth, and yeah, it's like a good gift if you give out presents like that, because it's not too expensive, but it's really high quality.
A good sauna drink.
Yeah, I don't know about that. We'll see.
We'll see. What are you drinking, Jesse? What are you drinking, Jesse?
I'm drinking a gin. So it's a local gin. It's called Tomcat.
Oh, cool.
It's aged in, I believe, whiskey barrels. So it's it drinks much more like a whiskey than a gin. Very smooth. Probably one of my favorites. So
I've never seen a gin that color. It must be from the aging in the barrels.
Yeah, from the aging in the barrels. Yeah, but it's delicious. It's if I could drink it every day, I would. But yeah, it's great. They make it right down the road from us, so it's good stuff.
Yeah.
What about you, Keith? What are you sipping?
This is nothing special. It's just a Gerald Steiner water. I had to grab something quick, so I didn't have any time to mix something up.
I have a whiskey, but it's not a bottle. It's my friend. He's a Cypriot. He knows more about whiskey than I do, and he bought lots of little sample bottles. So I thought I'd crack one open.
You're just doing airplane shooters?
Like little droppers.
So they're just like
a little dropper bottle.
They're ones that are like pretty expensive. So he's just buying little sample bottles of different ones that he wouldn't buy a bottle of. So I'm just he's just buying extra ones for me because I'm Scottish, so I just get them added to my shopping cart for some reason. So not arguing.
Are you in Scotland right now, or where?
No, I'm in Cyprus. Okay. So yeah, I'm kind of either here or Highlands in Scotland. But I feel like I'm in Scotland today because it's the first day it's cold. It's the first day I've put the heating on. First day I've felt like, it was raining outside and stormy wind, rain at the glass and stuff. First time I actually felt a little bit homesick for Christmas. But I'll be fine when the sun comes out again. I was in the sea yesterday, so it's not like this all the time, So it's random weather.
Yeah.
Eric, I'm getting an optical illusion. You have these, I don't know what's hanging behind you, but it looks like, when I just catch a glance of you on the screen, it looks like you're like 2 thumbs up on either side.
No, it's these handles for, I don't know, this is my friend's sauna. He's a masseuse and trainer, and I don't know if he uses these for something sexual or what, but they're kind of like straps that you can really hold on to and I guess reach different parts of your body when he's
sauna handles. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys already know each other, Jesse, Eric?
I mean, know each other is a relative term, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I don't even remember how I got connected with Eric. I mean, it was through Twitter. I'm not sure how at this point. And then Keith was, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months ago. Yeah. And then Kevin, you were relatively recent. Which is funny is my wife's big into posture and has actually heard of you before me. I was explaining to her about the podcast.
Cool.
She's like, oh, I think I've listened to him before. So
I remember your name once Eric said it, but I wasn't following you. I must have seen you a while ago. And I wasn't sure how I didn't already know, because normally I'd know everybody that everybody's talking about. So cool.
Yeah, Jesse, I think I came across you through Mark Beauvais.
Okay, yeah. Great guy.
Mm-hmm.
So so fire away. What kind of questions you guys have?
I'd like to know more about your tweets.
We're just gonna. Yeah.
I was just gonna say a tweet you said today. You said a tweet you tweeted today. You said that you had tons of sleep, but then you woke up and you were kind of groggy and tired, and you think it's something to do with the weather and the snow or the outside, and you think there's some connection. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's funny. I worked out pretty hard yesterday. I went for a hike at the sauna, all that, and I came in last night and was just exhausted. But fell asleep, slept like a rock, slept for like 10 hours. Had trouble getting up this morning, slept in. I noticed all our kids slept in. Everything seemed kind of sluggish. And it was funny because I tweeted that out and immediately had like multiple people being like, me too, me too, me too, me too. So yeah, you're one of them. It's one of those things where it's I do have a theory that low pressure systems affect our moods and kind of our vibe. I noticed that on high pressure days when the air is dry and it's sunny and there's not a cloud in the sky, you typically feel very, very uplifted. You feel energetic. And you notice that I feel like when you live in a place like Vermont, I live in northern Vermont for people who don't know, we have these extremes in weather, right? Where one day it'll be 55 degrees, the next day you're going to get a bunch of snow. The wintertime, it goes from cold to colder, essentially. We have high pressure systems where usually when it's high pressure in the wintertime, it's very, very bitter cold. And then a low pressure system will come in, we'll get a bunch of weather. But even in summer, it just oscillates between soggy, wet weather to humid, warm weather. It never really gets that hot up here. But I've definitely seen a direct connection to your energy levels and how you're feeling based on weather. And I like rainy, cold weather. I think it's good. It's contemplative, but it definitely seems to have an effect on one's moods. And I swear I've seen like low pressure systems affect like animals, especially if you get a bunch of cows that are calving. You'll see animals or lambs, pigs, stuff like that seem to kick into labor, I would say, before a low pressure system comes. There's definitely a connection there that I think that perhaps we were able to understand it a lot more, but it's something that's probably been lost. But there's definitely a connection.
Yeah. One thing I noticed moving from the suburbs up to the mountains is really I have no real experience with rural living before this. I did a lot of hiking, but never really spent a lot of time there. It's not like it wasn't like a switch was flipped, but all of a sudden I noticed I was sort of predicting the weather. You know what I mean? Like you become more sensitive. You smell the rain coming. So I think someone like you who kind of lives that life, then yeah, it's definitely I think you can probably regain that, or maybe you just never lost it. But I think most people probably have.
Yeah. I think some of that's like a pattern recognition thing. And I think some of it's just a feel thing. I know I commercial fished in Alaska for a while, and there's the captain was this old guy, awesome guy, one of the coolest guys I ever met. And he'd be listening to the weather radio on the boat. He'd come out and he'd say, no, the weather's calling for this, but he'd look around, he'd look at the sky, and he'd say, but that's not right. We're going to get this kind of weather at this time. And he almost nailed it like every time. Wow. I remember just being blown away by that kind of connection that he had to nature. And you just sit there and you'd look at the waves, you'd kind of look at the sky, smell the air, and just come out with a weather prediction that was 9 times out of 10 more accurate than what he was getting on the weather report. So
that's super impressive.
Yeah.
I have a friend.
All I can do is be like, yeah, I think I smell fog coming, but that's about it.
I have a friend from back home who's adamant that he can predict when it's going to rain by whether he gets sweaty balls or not. So like his ex-girlfriend confirms this. Says he's really good at predicting. He gets sweaty balls, it's going to rain within a day. I was like, you sure it's not spiders coming into the house? You're predicting the spiders, not the balls, but he's convinced it's the balls. So, and then he did it one time. Well, he told me one time, and then it worked. So anyway.
Yeah, right. Yo, do you one time?
He told me about it.
You should have a podcast.
I didn't insist on any data. I was fine with the verbal. But yeah. So I don't know how, but maybe that's somehow connected with something. I don't know. But yeah, so
have you guys? I was going to say, have you read anything about like the Polynesian settlers to the South Pacific?
I've read a little bit about Polynesian whalers.
Yeah, I've read a little, but just what little I've read is pretty incredible. The way they were able to kind of chart their path just by looking at looking at the birds, what kind of birds and which direction they were flying, and looking at the tides and just the way a wave looked, they could kind of figure out where they were going. And man, it's like a lot of that stuff I wonder how much of that happens under the surface, in the subconscious, like you just kind of know it, or how much they're piecing through with their executive functioning. I don't know. It's weird.
The only place I've read about that wasn't like a firsthand account, but in Robert Greene, the author, he's got a book called Mastery, and I think part of it, I don't know if it was Polynesian, but it was some type of Pacific Islander peoples that would sail across the ocean, and he explained how they had mastery of the ocean, the sky, like it was so a part of their culture. They were raised that way, so that's like formed the way they thought, and they were just masters of navigating the ocean pretty much, because that's it's almost like the intrinsic language that they used to navigate their life by is all these weather patterns, the way the ocean looked, the way the sky looked, and all these things. So it was built into them from birth pretty much.
Yeah, I guess you do it long enough, it becomes embedded in your genetics,
Yeah, well, that was the point of this. It was well, obviously the book was Mastery, so it was people that are real masters of the craft and how they get to be that way.
And they're also using the position of the constellations in the stars to to not
I
just
don't know
navigate,
if they didn't actually have any like instruments measuring it, but they just did it all by I guess memorization of the sky and how it looked and what direction they had to go.
It's not just navigating. They would the constellations. They would embed stories about the culture and rules for living and stuff, and the little just mythologies would be built into the positions of the stars. So you just needed to remember the stories, and then you could uncode the star knowledge in it at the same time. And it's all just kind of all one thing. They're not really thinking it separate at all. And a lot of those older cultures seem to have the words for like the sky or like space with all the stars will be the same as for the ocean. Like they're kind of, because there's on the sea so much that these things are related somehow. Maybe not the same word, but they would have there'd be concepts that included both
or something. Yeah.
Jesse,
I don't think we look up at the sky enough. Sorry to cut you off.
No worries. I was going to ask, can you do you know when a cow is going to calve or whatever, like down to the day or the time of day or whatever?
If you artificially inseminate them, you have a due date like you would,
okay,
like a person kind of. And it's, it's always hit or miss. It's usually around that date. But as far as like intuitively knowing, I guess I've seen enough calvings at this point where I can kind of look at a cow and be like, oh yeah, she's going to calve in the next day or two, typically, or she's starting to go into labor. And that's all mostly just behavior. You're looking at the cow, the way she's standing, not eating, chewing her cud. It's just kind of you just look at her and tell. So
my mother has the same.
I should back that up for a second. Like a lot of people, I'm sure that are listening don't know. I work on a conventional dairy. So I have a homestead. We have a few cows here that we do our own beef and dairy with, but professionally I work on a dairy. So we're calving in like 300 calves a year, essentially.
Cool.
Yeah, that reminded me, my mother, my dad has, they have sheep, and she always knows when the sheep are, she calls it tuning up. She goes, she's tuning up. My dad's like, no, she's fine. Let's just go home. It's fine. And she's like, no, she's tuning up. And then almost always she gets it right. It's just something about they're just doing something, women's intuition, maybe. I don't know.
So I had a question, maybe you can clear up. I don't know. I'm sure among all of us, you have a bit more insight, Jesse. You hear a lot of horror stories or doom predictions about, meat production in this country. What do you think? How serious is the issue? What do you think maybe regular people should do to get ahead of it? Provided they don't want to just go vegetarian.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated question because it's a complicated issue. You can go multiple ways of that. People are talking about supply chain issues. We've consolidated the slaughter industry to the point where you have these massive factories processing all these, and it doesn't take much to shut one of those plants down. I mean, we saw it with COVID, right? A couple positive COVID cases, and they shut production down. Or it can be a sanitization issue, all this stuff. So whether or not that's going to become a major issue going forward, I think it could be. I also believe that we're at the forefront of, the war on meat. We're already seeing it, and it's kind of the new target for environmentalists is that, meat is bad. It's intrinsically bad for a host of reasons. And meat isn't bad. But I do agree that there needs to be, and there should always be, a conversation of critique about, how we do agriculture, particularly how we do agriculture at scale. So how do you get ahead of it? I think it's complicated, right? Because the price that you're going to pay for something that's raised on a small farm that you have a relationship with is going to be quite a bit more. I think it's worth it for the benefits. And the meat industry is sketchy. Like, let's admit it. Like, there's some pretty sketchy parts of it. And unfortunately, in my opinion, a lot of that doesn't really fall necessarily on producers. It falls on, how we finish meat and the processing end of it. I think people have this theory that all beef is raised in these massive feedlots where the corn and soy is getting tucked to them, and they're living in a, absolute pit of filth, and, then they die violently. And that's really not the case. At least for beef, a lot of beef cows are raised on the plains. They're raised with their moms grazing. Many of them are finished on feedlots, but that's 3 to 6 months of their lives are in a feedlot, and then their lives are over. They usually have a dry place to lay down, food in front of them. Personally, I'm not in favor of tucking a bunch of corn and soy at your animals for a host of nutritional reasons. I think it's just a cheap, easy way to finish animals and get them fat. Obviously, I think you guys have probably talked about this before, or at least amongst ourselves, that the quality of the meat's definitely going to degrade by putting them on a diet that's not natural to what they've kind of evolved to eat. But ultimately, like, not all feedlots are necessarily evil or bad. I had a buddy who dated a girl whose parents ran a hog farm out in like Iowa, and they did like 20,000 hogs, like something ridiculous. And the operation was insanely clean. Their pigs looked happy. Again, I'm not necessarily the kind of meat that I want to eat, but it didn't necessitate that these animals had a bad life. Right. There's poorly run farms, there's well-run farms, but preparing for the future, it's kind of why we do what we do. I have a rather pessimistic outlook on our culture and where we're headed. And so the more that we can pull calories off our land, particularly high quality proteins, is important to us. And if we can do that and provide for some of our neighbors, great. But it's something that I think people who are conscious of that are going to have to navigate. And it's so dependent on the context that you're in and where you're at. I live in Vermont, and you can find good grass-fed freezer beef anywhere. It's not something that's rare. You can go out and find it. Yeah. Same with pastured pork, pastured poultry. We're really in a good place for that. But if you're in the middle of the suburbs of Illinois, I think that's going to be a lot more of a challenge for you. So the best thing I think is to try to find a farm that you build a relationship with that farm and kind of get to know their practices, and commit that you're going to have to spend more money than you'd probably feel comfortable with if that's the route you want to go. Mm-hmm. So that's the short end of it.
Yeah, sometimes, I in late summer, I split like a cow share from a local farm. And it wasn't that expensive. For the quantity of meat that you get, I think that's a big thing. If you have a freezer that you can keep it in, and you're buying bulk, I don't think you necessarily have to spend that much more for better quality meat than you get at a grocery store.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's definitely, it's a volume thing, right? It's like a lot of money. It's a lot more money up front. But when you look at like an individual's ribeye that's on your plate that you're grilling up, and you realize that if you went to the store and bought that same grass-fed ribeye, you're looking at man, I'm eating like a $30 steak right now. It cost me $4.25 a pound to do this, So there's definitely a cost up front that it does save money in the long run for sure. But you just have to be prepared to fork over more up front and to have the logistics in your house, the freezer space, like you said. So, and some people that's hard. If you live in an apartment, that can be really hard, Yeah.
I just picked up I just paid for a whole cow. I haven't picked it up yet, but I think all said and done, it's going to be about $3,000 for like about 600 pounds of, product. And it's organic, grass fed. It's from a farm about 2 hours away. So I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm sure, most of it will be, either lean roasts or ground beef, but, a good portion will be the stuff that you normally pay $20 a pound for if you're going to go to like a Whole Foods or some health store for grass fed, ribeyes. So I have the room for it. So I'm pretty happy with that.
I have to take advantage of it. One of the things that we've gotten into is I think a lot of homesteaders try to bite off more than they can chew. And they're trying to do chickens and pork and goats or cows or whatever. And what we found very early on is that we try to do a few things and to do a few things really well. And so I like cows. I've always loved cows. I grew up around cows. And so, working full time, I'm a father of 4, we homeschool, and we're like, why don't we just really focus on cows and, fill our freezers and then trade and barter with it. So, we're trading and bartering for lamb, pork. We don't eat a lot of poultry, but I'm sure I could find somebody to trade. And that's really key if you live in an area. If you, do something that you can get an excess of, and then trade it. Yeah. Trade and barter. And people that are into the same kind of things that we are going to be all about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jesse, how much land do you need?
Marketplace right there,
Yeah. Sorry, Eric.
I was just saying that's basically how a marketplace began. It's probably the very first one.
Yeah.
It's just like that. People who are good at one thing trade their wares with someone who's good at something else.
Yeah. Agree. What are you saying, Keith?
I was asking how much land you need
to raise a cow.
Yeah. Is it like 10 acres or 5 or 20 or I don't know.
Again, it depends on where you're at, like context. And this is one of the reasons I don't like, people always ask me what I'm reading for homesteading books or people I'm following or videos I'm watching. And I don't read or watch anything on homesteading. And
you like that farm guy, right?
Oh God, that guy is such a trip. He is something else. I get a good laugh out of that. I probably shouldn't even post about it, but it's just hard not to. But a lot of people are out there trying to recreate the wheel, and so much of homesteading and farming is about the context that you're in, right? Like, it's like, I'm in northern Vermont, man. We got 6 to 7 months of hard winter here. Our grass grows very well, but incredibly fast. And so we're packing a grazing season and harvesting all of our feed for the following winter in a matter of 4 months. Wow. So as far as acreage goes, like, raise a cow in Virginia is going to be a lot different than the acreage it takes to raise a cow in Vermont, just because the grass is going to grow a lot faster up here. We harvest the same amount of hay that they harvest down south, but we do, or maybe more in some cases, but we're doing it in a very, very short window. So you can theoretically, it depends on how much you want to feed out, right? Like, we're doing all grass fed. So we're, if you want to supplement feed animals, if you're going to do grain, you need less grass for that. If you're going to supplement hay throughout the year, you can do a lot less grass. It really depends on how much you want to supplement. But as far as doing it these weekends is what you want, and that's heavily managing it. We move our cows every day.
Eric, so see the cow that you bought, how long do you think that will last you?
I don't know. I have to kind of I don't think in pounds. I got to see it, lay before me, I think. But it'll probably last longer than I think, because people will just start getting sick of ground beef. I mean, I won't, but the family will. So I don't know, man. I'd say at least half a year, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
4 kids, we go through almost 1,000 pounds of beef a year.
Oh yeah,
and that's eating beef. Like, that's about. And I mean, we eat beef almost every day.
Yeah.
And the kids do get sick of ground beef. You got to start getting creative in how you use it, which is fun. I mean, it makes you a better cook. But it's we fly through beef. We do 2 beefs for ourselves, or at least a beef and a half every year.
Okay.
Wild.
So what's your top way to use the ground beef? Like, what's the most creative?
You know, I mean, obviously with kids, we do a lot of burgers, good burgers. We make our own buns, all that stuff. But we also do a lot of curries. You know, I had this, we should talk about feeding kids because that's always a hot topic in my house, right? I find that ground beef is a great way to introduce kids subtly to new flavors as well. So it's like, I'll do burgers and I'll just put a little hint of curry in those burgers, and kind of slowly introduce those kids to flavors like curry or garlic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then move that into doing like a beef and rice dish for them. We'll cook the rice in their own bone broth and then do like a curried beef with it or something like that. And, 2 or 3 out of the 4 kids will always eat it. There's always one that kind of balks at it, and that's the way it goes. So, yeah. What are you eating, Eric?
I'm eating some beef jerky.
Nice.
Yeah. Just finished a workout here, so I'm a little hungry, but I can always eat. Yeah, one of the great pleasures of life, right?
Love eating.
What's funny is
Jesse,
we're all
outside
on,
of
fasting. We're on the fasting group chat.
Yeah, what's that?
We're all in the fasting group chat. Yeah, we love you.
Are we all in that chat? Of all of us, all 4 of us in there?
No, not Kevin.
I'm not. No.
We should get you.
Kevin, do you want to be in? We could add you.
I'm not a big faster, to be
I can
honest.
speak up for you, man.
Okay.
I'm not against it.
You
I
should
just
be in the
it's
chat.
I've never got into it. I've never really tried, to be honest. Done it a few times. I basically just one time I did it for 3 or 4 days, and I basically just hid under the covers in the bed for the last 2 days. Couldn't function at all.
Of course, Kevin would go all out. Like first time he tried fasting,
that may be part of the problem. Yeah. So yeah, this is what happens if you get an idea from Twitter. You're getting an idea from someone who's way deep already on this thing. There's no surface level, and you just think this is the entry point, and you just try it, and you're fucked.
I think we could probably mess people up pretty good just by posting some really cockamamie, experiments to try.
For definite.
Yes, you guys gonna all run out and buy a cow tomorrow and just jump right into it?
You should. What's the situation in Cyprus? What's the meat situation there? It's about a lamb and goat.
Yeah, it's a lot of lamb and it's a lot of lamb and pork. It's it's just pork all the time.
I wonder how the pork is raised there.
I prefer the lamb here. I love the lamb. There's there's traditional way they cook it in this kind of outdoor clay oven, and takes like hours, half a day or whatever. And the meat's just falling off the bone and stuff. It's amazing. And then like the lamb chops and stuff are amazing. And the seafood is the other thing I eat here. You were talking about seafood on Twitter yesterday, Eric, I think. I was thinking about seafood last week, and it was I was going to talk about it in the podcast anyway, because there was some in when I have all the seafood in front of me, and the shellfish and that, it clicks something in my mind, and I go into this. I love devouring it. There's like this devouring mentality just comes upon me, and so I only get it either with if I eat brains or marrow, I get this kind of frenzy feeling. It happens all the time. I don't know what it is. And seafood, I just go into this devouring mode. I love it. It's enjoyable. And I thought I was imagining it, but then one time my girlfriend put some marrow in my mouth on a spoon without me knowing what it was, and I had that frenzied feeling. I was like, "What's that?" And then it turned out it was marrow. So it's a real thing for me, anyway. I don't know what's triggering, and it happens when I get eat brains as well. But I don't know, is it some sort of cannibal memories, maybe ancestral cannibals? Who knows?
You come from
guys, big organ meat eaters.
I never used to be, but I have been recently, yeah.
Not Keith, though.
What was the question?
Organ meat. We're still trying to convince Keith to dip into the liver.
I'm with Keith, man. I'm not a big liver guy at all. I know it's good for me, and if for some reason I've never been able to get into like livers unless it's like shitty chicken livers wrapped in bacon or something like that. But I don't know why. We get, obviously you kill a beef, you get a massive amount of liver, and I always end up giving it away to my neighbors, and You could. I have a friend, a coworker, that suggested grinding it up into your ground beef, which is a great way to mix it in without really being able to taste the flavor and get the nutritional benefits of it. But man, I'm not a big liver guy. I can't get into it. I'll eat heart.
Yeah.
I'll eat tongue. I'll eat, all the other stuff, but never in my life have I kind of craved liver the way that some of my other friends do.
Yeah, heart is a lot easier to get into than liver. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I've ever craved liver, but I can enjoy it and appreciate it. But I don't know that it's all that necessary, to be honest. I mean, you think about the liver there's only one in the animal. It's not like people are eating tons of it,
Maybe it was just appreciated because it was because there's only one. It's like a rare portion of meat.
Everybody gets a little sliver.
Yeah.
It's probably enough.
I don't know if I've ever said I've been against liver. I haven't really had it.
Assume.
No. Lamb. I'm against lamb. So I know you guys all seem to really like lamb, but I just don't like the taste.
Okay, I'll need to start lamb posting more now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta take the lamb pill.
I've had it. I just don't like it.
I have a friend that's the same. He grew up in Alaska on Kodiak, and I guess his dad would always. He grew up eating like rams with huge balls, so it just tasted like nothing but. I get I think lamb and goat, they can really pick up the flavor of the hormones coursing through them, so he can't even touch lamb because he just has those memories.
Yeah, I can't say I've had the same experience, but same outcome though, I guess.
Yeah.
If you've ever had mutton, it's like, I've had some really strong tasting mutton before, and that would definitely, I feel like if you've had a bad experience with mutton, I could definitely see you blocking at lamb. So, or like an old goat, like an old dairy goat or an old ram or billy goat. Yeah. Kind of nasty.
Those don't appeal to me at all. Lamb, goat, whatever, mountain
goat.
You
like the cheese, though. You like the cheese.
The cheese is great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the cheese.
Yeah. So I think, Kevin, there was one of the topics we were talking about was technology, right? That was the one you proposed a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. So we were talking about I don't know, I'll ask you, Jesse, what's your relationship with technology? So based on, a lot of people are hardcore one way or the other. What's your relationship with it?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if I was a single bachelor, I'd probably be kind of a Luddite, right? Like I'd be, and we have friends like this living here in Vermont where we have multiple people on our road that don't have running water. And part of that's a poverty thing, and part of that's an issue of choice. As far as technology goes, it's tough because I'm raising 4 little kids in this world that's saturated in technology, and I don't want them to be behind. Like I don't want to hinder their development when they get out into the real world and become adults. I want to be able to navigate that. And so it's for me, it comes down to parenting in such a way that we're navigating all this, where we're teaching our kids to be connected to nature in a very, very deep way, but also teaching them how to navigate technology and being conscientious that stuff can be very, very addicting. We live in an era where everything's saturated in screens. Like my kids, before we pulled them out of school, they'd all get their own personal iPads in school. It was like the kid doesn't need to be on a screen all day. They're already at school. All that stuff and a lot of the stuff that we see in technology, at least as far as screen time is concerned, is very, very addictive. I mean, it's addictive to me, never mind the brain of a 5-year-old. And so as far as technology on that end of things, we try to limit screen time. We try to limit our own screen time. We don't have a TV in our house. We don't watch TV. As far as technology on the homesteading side of it, I own a tractor. I use my tractor every day. Not every day, but we use a tractor frequently. I try to homestead in such a way that I'm getting connected with the soil and the ground as much as possible. To try to have a very hands-on approach, I think is good. And I think it fulfills a sense of purpose when you're getting your hands dirty and you're physically exerting yourself. I almost needlessly physically exert myself on our homestead, You know, like I could run water lines and pump water to our cows in our homestead, but it's an excuse for me to go outside every day and have to water them by hand by bucketing water out of a brook. Keeps me in shape, keeps me out there observing them, gets me out in the fresh air. So I'm not anti-technology at all. I'm also, you know, I think we should be pro-technology in a way, but we need to be wise about that. We need to be prudent. We need to be, you know, we need to examine that and say, is this disconnecting us more from nature and from each other and from each other as a family unit? There's a million ways that you can kind of skin a cat, but that's kind of our approach to it. So we're not anti-tech. I'm not necessarily pro-tech. We're kind of taking that middle ground, the via media, where we're looking at things and deciphering whether or not this is a benefit or not a benefit. That's kind of the long answer there. As far as like technology that we deploy on our homestead, like I said, I use a tractor, moving round bales. All of our hay, we try to be conscientious of where we're getting our stuff. All of our hay is harvested within 10 miles of my house. So obviously that stuff's being harvested with highly mechanized equipment. I don't see anything wrong with that. We're still milking and hand milking our cows into a bucket at home. I find that I could get a milking machine, I actually have one, but I find that sitting down with my cow and with my head buried into her side and hand milking her is very contemplative. It's a way to connect with that animal at a working level that most people don't have that connection to a working animal. Those are the little things that we do to try to stay grounded, I would say. But I'm skeptical of anybody who becomes a little legalistic about banning all technology or really being averse to it. You know, we can get into the Amish. You know, we actually have some Amish people up here now. And I don't know, at the same time, you look at their life and how they're doing it, and there's something innately very appealing about it. So I could be wrong. But this is kind of the groove that we've settled into and how we're approaching it.
Your kids help out around the farm a lot?
As much as possible. They're all really little. You know, we ended up, my wife and I were married for like 8 or 9 years before we had kids. And all of a sudden we had 4 kids. You know, my kids' ages right now, 2, 4, 6, and 8.
Oh, okay.
So we're, it's just chaos. And we're just getting to the point where our 2 oldest are getting really helpful. You know, planting garlic, weeding stuff, even like hauling water for cows, stacking wood. I think my kids are in my basement right now as we speak, stacking wood. So
really, that's great.
Yeah. I didn't give them a choice, but you know, they're having fun with it. So hey, I think it's important. I think it's kids. Yeah, I was kind of raised in a homestead, and so it was always, you know, we had to stack wood, we had to haul water. When blueberry season was in, when I was a kid, my parents wouldn't let me come in at night, and so I picked an entire coffee can full of blueberries. And so little things like that, and I loved it. Like, I thought it was awesome. So little things like that, we're trying to get our kids to do the same. So as much as possible.
So your health and fitness are coming from the land, the environment around you. It's pre-integrated. You don't need to integrate it. Yeah,
that's what we try. Because to be honest, like I work out from time to time, but like I don't have the time to work out that I wish I had. And so also with working out, like I want to have fun working out. You know, so my idea of working out is like going on a hike, going on a bike ride, swimming in our pond, playing with our kids, right? Integrating it into our methodology and working. You know, like I said, we're hauling water. You know, I could split wood on a mechanical splitter, or I could blow through and split a cord of wood by hand. Whether or not as I age and get older, I switch to more of that stuff, you know, if and when my body breaks down, I'm open to that. But I also have this kind of grind set where like I just want to keep grinding right till the end, you know. Yeah.
There's something more meaningful anyway if you're chopping the wood by yourself and then putting it on the fire by yourself.
Yeah.
It's somehow warmer than the automated heating would have been. The food you reared yourself tastes better. Yeah. You don't, well, no, just tastes better on a normal level, but also because it's more meaningful, you probably don't even need as much to be satisfied. You can probably eat less. I can't prove this, but you can probably less food will satisfy you because there's it's triggering some kind of deeper meaning in you. rather than just,
I
like
definitely don't eat less, but yeah.
Yeah, well, both is better.
Kevin, there's actually a little bit of research into that. At least like there's this one study where they had guys either chop wood or do an equivalent amount of like calorically equivalent amount of just normal training, like exercise.
Right.
And then they did that for a few weeks and they tested their testosterone levels. And they started the baseline, the levels were all the same. By the end of the 3 weeks, the guys who were chopping wood had double the testosterone of the dudes who were doing the same amount of work, but it was all like weights and stuff. So it wasn't meaningful. Whereas the chopping wood activates something in your body where it's like, oh, I'm not just doing this in the gym. I'm actually doing this to survive or to provide warmth for my family.
There's definitely a greater purpose, and there's something profound about, when it's 20 below and you're bringing wood up from your basement and you're firing it into your wood stove, keeping your family warm. And we try to make things as family oriented as possible, right? So like I'm chopping wood and my kids are stacking it, and that's not always easy, because kids are hard to manage, and we try to make it fun for them. But there is something profound about cooking meat that was born, raised, and died on your land. Heating your house with wood that you chopped or stacked, whatever. There's something that I think is deeply innate that has been part of the human experience for hundreds of thousands of years. In a lot of cases, that we've been separated by technology. Going back to the technology question, so I think that, like I said, it's to try to find a higher purpose in what we do. I think is I feel very fulfilled in my life. You know what I mean? Like I have a lot of fun doing what I do. I feel incredibly fulfilled, but what I can't say is that it's easy, right? Like I grind. Like I'm up every day at 4 a.m. for work. I'm physically working myself hard. It's never easy, but it's very, very fulfilling. It feels good. So
I think those two are linked. The difficulty and the satisfaction. You can't separate those. It's probably, it's all connected.
I talk about this a lot philosophically, is I think that joy, we live in this society right now that's just everything's about consumption and consuming and about getting that dopamine hit. And there's something about the whole slow food movement, working hard. Like joy takes cultivation, right? Like we want what we think makes us happy, and most people just stuff their face with cheap, empty calories and screens, right? And TV shows and media. But cultivating real joy takes an immense amount of work, physical work, emotional work, mental work. But all things that are truly worthy, I think, just take toil. And if you're not ready or in that mindset to make that happen, I think you're gonna kind of flounder a bit and finding yourself and finding purpose and meaning in things.
And when you're doing things like this, you don't getting fuel for a fire on a cold day and sitting in front of the fire and watching the logs burn and listening to it crackle or whatever. You're not craving stimulation online so much. It's much more interested in scrolling. You're just you're already occupied like that, and it's something different. It's not like most people who are going to sit in front of the fire and then go on Twitter and say, I sat in front of a fire, it was amazing. It's not that. It's you just don't need it. You don't crave it as much. It's almost like the glowing
screens.
Yeah, it's like a replacement for it.
Yeah.
It's more. I mean, for 6-7 months out of the year, my day begins at between 2:30 and 4 a.m. by getting up and starting a fire, or rekindling the fire from the night before, and so it's I agree. It's or watching things. It does make you a weirdo, right? Like I hang out, like most people from the burbs think I'm fucking crazy, right? Like they talk to me and it's like all they want to talk about is their jobs or like TV shows that they watch or whatever outrage media thing has happened recently. And I don't pay attention to it really. And it makes you kind of a weirdo to them, I'm like, I don't get it. I don't care, and then they can't believe that you can't care. And it's like, yeah, they're going to think you're insane by sitting in front of your fire, staring at the fire and zoning out for half an hour than you are watching the latest, Netflix, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And the older I get, the more stark that difference becomes. It's kind of wild to observe. So,
but what's funny is it's all that it's still inside everybody, like you take people on a camping trip and at night, everybody's just sitting there staring into the fire. These could be, I've done this with, silicon, like tech guys, people who work at Facebook spend 12 hours a day at Google, but you get them out in the woods and something wakes up in them. So it's like, it's just waiting to be rekindled.
I got to figure out how to capitalize on that,
Yeah.
No, start sending the tech bros out to hang out with the 44 homestead, so.
Totally. I mean, I think I told you we did one a few years ago. We did sort of a little men's retreat with like 4 guys, like some VC, 2 guys that were in real estate, and then a retired guy. And we took them out and we basically we put them through the ringer. We had them chopping wood and, like cooking meals over the fire. We were going on hikes and, they had to carry the axe, and we would like set up logs across the path and be like, okay, if you want to get through, you gotta chop through that. And then you have to carry the log to the picnic spot. And so everything was like, there's like this ebb and flow of toil and then extreme, joy. Because then you'd work real hard and then we'd have this great spread in the meadow with like, really good wine and cheese and stuff. And they really, it really worked well. It was fun. I don't know. It'd be hard to, it's possible to monetize it, but you
almost don't want to monetize it either. You know what I mean? Like you want people to like figure that out on their own and like kind of have that self-discovery. It almost feels greedy to try to monetize it. I mean, people are right. Like,
I think what it did was it paid for itself. It was like we broke even, and we're all happy. We're like, man, this is great because we helped them out, and we had a great time. Yeah.
It's our homestead's name is Field Table and Hearth. And the reason that we named it that was because we felt like there's 3 things that are endangered in our society right now. And one is the field and a connection to the field in a meaningful way. You know what I mean? Where you're working with the soil, you're looking at the soil biology and increasing your fertility and seeing the results of that, and working from sprout to harvest, and a table. Like we're really big in our house of eating meals together. We try to eat, and it doesn't really happen so much in the summer, right? Because like after 6-7 months of winter, you just want to be outside, and it's it gets stays light till 8-9 o'clock at night. It's usually like super quick meals. We're outside doing stuff, but in the winter, we really try to slow things down and have family meals where we're all eating around the table, gathering, convening, trying to have good conversation. And with 4 kids, I'm not always saying that that's easy or that's not chaos. It is, but we try. And then the hearth is in the winter, we want the hearth to kind of be the center of our home. It's where we gather for warmth. We listen to a lot of music. We read a lot of books out loud. But we're not spending a ton of time in front of screens. We still have screen time for our kids. Our kids still watch stuff on YouTube and stuff like that. But, we're trying to limit that and try to recenter us. And what I found is that making our land, our food, our table, our hearth, the center of our home is something that gives us, again, it goes back to giving us a lot of meaning, a lot of sense of purpose, a lot of happiness. I find a lot of peace in that. And I think that my kids do too. And I don't think that they'll probably fully appreciate that until they're adults, until they're out of it. And then they look back upon it. And I'm okay with that. But
you said you grew up on a homestead, or have you always been in Vermont, or you lived somewhere else previously?
No, so I grew up in a little town in Western Massachusetts outside of the Pioneer Valley. And I've had family out there since they got off the boat from England. And little tiny hill town, less 1,000 people. My uncle had a grass-fed beef operation right across the road from us. And my parents, we always had a few chickens around. We always had a garden. We'd get beef from my uncle. He had a sugaring operation. We were making maple syrup and stuff. And we raised pigs every year, occasionally a cow. But we worked our land with draft animal power, which is kind of cool. So I grew up working land with draft mules, draft horses, and oxen. And again, when you're growing up, you're not really, it's work, right? Like it's hard work. And so it's kind of cool, but it's also kind of a pain in the ass. And then you get out. I grew up in a very isolated area, and grew up and I got out and I lived outside of Boston, went to a military academy for a couple of years. And it wasn't until I got out that I began to really appreciate what I had and really kind of form my vision for like, okay, if we're gonna have kids someday, I'm gonna get married and settle down. I want to raise my kids in as similar of a manner as what I had, you know. So it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah,
it's definitely something that
back to where we came from.
What's that?
I said full circle. You returned back to your roots.
You grew up on a cranberry farm, right?
Yeah, I was a diver. No, that's Eric playing a joke on everyone. I have never done anything with cranberries in my life.
It's an interesting denial.
Oh, that's funny.
New Jersey does have cranberry farms in like southern and western New Jersey, but I think it's actually one of the biggest places in the country where they produce cranberries. But no, I have no affiliation with that. That's all Eric's just imagination.
I was expecting to come out with like the Ocean Crest cranberry t-shirt on, just ready to roll, you know, you're working the bogs with your waders on, you know, just coming off the bog. So
it's all a lie. It's all fake.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, funny. That's funny. No, it was a good way to grow up. And like, again, I'm not saying, I hope I don't make everything seem like idyllic, right? Like I didn't grow up very much didn't grow up in an idyllic setting, but there were elements to it that I tried to carry it into adulthood, and I'm trying to do with our kids, you know, like the meal thing, the connection to land. You know, my house, both my parents could cook, and that was probably one of the greatest blessings they gave me. They were both really good in the kitchen, and meals were like, we always ate together, like almost every night. And that wasn't idyllic, you know, like I didn't grow up in a great home, but we ate together, and that had a profound effect on me into adulthood. So I think it's about incorporating those things and you know, trying to do that for my kids.
Yeah.
So, and for myself, right? Like get a lot of joy out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you always want to homestead when you grew up, or were you trying to get away from it originally? And then
yeah, it's funny. Like when you grow up, you grow up in a small town, and it was the town I grew up in. It's kind of poor. It was this weird mix mash of hippies and rednecks, and it was when you grow up, you just want to get out, right? Like I got to get the hell out of here.
Yep.
And you know, my goal is I went to a military academy. I was going to join the military and serve, and I always had an idea that I'd go back to it. You know, I was going to put in my 20 years and retire, figure out something else. And it's a long story as to why I didn't go that route. But I couldn't wait to get out, and I got out, and I'll never forget. I was back home one night, and the only bar in town. It's like 12 bar stools, a couple tables, classy little place. And I ran into an old classmate of mine, and she, her mom had gone to school with like all my aunts and uncles. We're talking like multi-generations of, you know, we all knew each other. And she was living outside of Boston at the time. And she was like, man, she's like, Jesse, I can't wait to figure out how to get back home. You know, she's like, fuck this. Like, I don't want to live in the city, you know, like I want to go back home and work the farm that she grew up on. And I remember thinking like, man, me too. Like, that's all I want. And so it was, I very quickly, after I went out and traveled a bit and saw the world, realized that what I had at home was pretty good. You know, the community that we had, the lifestyle that we lived. And it began this like 10-year journey of me and my wife trying to figure out how to make that happen. And we spent many, many nights, you know, I was in my 20s, spinning my wheels as far as a career goes, working shitty jobs, trying to make money, trying to figure out how do we kind of escape the city life and get back to how I grew up. And I wish I could sit here and like tell people who are listening how to do that. We basically just got lucky. We bought a house at the bottom of the housing market in 2010 and flipped it a couple years later for a 6-figure profit, and we're able to come up here and buy kind of our dream property. So we just got lucky essentially, you know. But yeah, it's definitely something that you develop an appreciation for as you age. And then the challenge is once you get out, how do you get back, right? Because it's not easy finding jobs in a rural area. And you have to kind of adjust your standards of living to realize that, you know, you have to be okay being, you know, relatively not a high income and just kind of making it work. Obviously, all that's changing with the advent of like high-speed internet in rural areas. My wife works from home. I have a lot of friends up here that work remotely as well and make a pretty good salary. But yeah, definitely was ingrained in me from early in my 20s. Like, how do I get back? How do I keep doing this? So
how much of what you consume is like from your local area?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people ask me this. It's probably 80 to 90%. And again, I think it's that, you know, all of our beef comes from our land, all of our pork is local, all of our chicken's local, eggs are local. It's not until you start getting, ironically enough, into the processed foods that you start getting stuff that's not from the area. So most of our protein comes from our own land. Even if I don't have time to milk my cow and the calf gets it all, you know, I'm pulling milk off the bulk tank at work for stuff, you know, working at dairy, so I can just fill up jugs of milk whenever I want. A lot of it, yeah, 80 to 90%, I would say. And that 10% is probably like stuff you're cheating on, you know, like sugar or, you know, I don't know, even our wheat, right? Like my neighbor grows 50 acres of organic wheat. And so we'll go down a couple times a year. I get a 50-pound bag of stone ground flour that was raised within 10 miles of our house, and we're doing sourdoughs with it. And that's awesome. You know, that's what we make all our wheat stuff with. So it's Vermont's in a very unique position to be able to do that, because agriculture is really kind of the backbone of our economy.
Yeah.
So it's it makes it really easy, and it's a lot of small farms and people depend on each other. So it's very easy to develop networks of people to acquire things that are local.
Do you do any hunting?
I grew up, I was big hunting and fishing family growing up. If it wasn't beef, we were eating venison. You know, we did a lot of upland bird hunting. Now, as an adult, it's really just a matter of time. You know, I don't have the time to get in the woods like I used to. Shoot grouse once in a while. I haven't actually shot a deer since I moved here, which is a little embarrassing. But also, I haven't really gone out much, and my freezer's full of beef anyway. So, but I'm very pro hunting. I think it's a great way to get out, connect with nature. I have this theory that if you're going to eat meat, I think that everybody at one point should kill or be present with an animal that they're going to eat, you know, because it's a profound experience, especially if you've been insulated from that your whole life. Like it's violent, right? Like people try to sanitize death so much in our culture that when they see it, I think it's a very stark thing, you know, to watch a cow get shot in the head and then bled out. It's a very violent act, but I think, or shooting a deer, whatever, you know, I think it's important for somebody to kill what they're going to eat. You'll definitely gain it.
Young, your first fish is shocking. Killing the first fish.
Yeah,
you know, I still remember the feeling of it, and like not knowing what I felt, and then being happy when I did. But
it's good. I think it's good for you. I think it's good to have that kind of connection, because then you realize that the life is precious, right? Like it's all life is precious and very unique, right? Like in the sense of the grand scope of the universe, from what we can observe from planet Earth, at least, there's a lot of empty space and not a lot of life. And so to take life, to consume it, I think is fine morally, but I think that it's important to do that task at least once in your life, you know, and you will gain an appreciation for that life. And really, like, you want the best for it. Like I want my cows to be able to be fully cows and to enjoy their lives before they're killed and put in our freezer or sold. So
yeah.
Do you consider your I guess the manner that you live like a spiritual act?
I do, yeah, I do. And that, I mean, God, you could do a whole nother podcast episode on that. I do consider it a spiritual act. It's I wasn't raised religious at all. And I had a Baptist fundamentalist summer camp down the road from my house, like a mile and a half down the road from my house. And my mom got cancer when I was in ninth grade, and she used to walk. She's a very active woman, and she used to walk every night. And she ended up meeting this counselor at the summer camp who was sneaking off the campgrounds to chain smoke cigarettes. And so she developed this friendship with this lady, and then she got diagnosed with cancer, and she began getting involved. And that was kind of like her introduction to Christianity. And I got caught smoking pot when I was like 14, and as punishment, I got sent to the fundamentalist Bible camp down the road from my house. Long story short, became a Christian, walked away from my faith after accumulating a couple of degrees in theology, and slowly but surely, I think, finding my way back. I'm not a materialist, right? Not in the sense where I went through a period of time where I thought that everything was just chemical reactions, laws of physics, that there wasn't anything kind of transcendental happening. There was no transcendent. And I believe that I'm hitting a point where I realize that's an incredibly bankrupt way for me to view the world. There's something going on here. I'm increasingly convinced that's beyond what we can comprehend. And whether that leads me back to a more orthodox faith in Christianity is yet to be seen. It wouldn't surprise me. But if you look at ancient human practices, they found great purpose and great spiritual resolve in certain things in life, right? Like, being connected with your land, rituals, sacrifices, seasons of feasting and fasting. And when I do those things, I do feel a deep spiritual sense, So yeah, I think that you have to ask questions like, what does it mean to be human? And why do we find such great purpose in taking wood that we've split and throwing it on our fire to keep our family warm? Why do we feel this deep, innate sense of peace when we stare into a fire or we lay out and look at the stars for a couple hours at night? There's something to that that's more than just a dopamine hit or a chemical reaction in our body. I'm convinced, and I could be wrong, but that's where I'm headed with it.
For definite, yeah. It's like people are try to reduce sunlight to vitamin D. As if being in the sun is this giant vitamin D dispenser in the sky, and you have to go out and get your shot, and then you can go back to the important stuff.
It was always sacred in like all these cultures, right? Like the sunshine and sun is always, there's gods that are named after the sun. You know what I mean? Like there's obviously a deep, innate human thing. And I think, to be fair, I think a lot of modernists, we think that anybody born before the Enlightenment was an idiot, right? Like it's like, oh, some of those people were smart, but yeah, they believed in gods and all this stuff. And we kind of denigrate their thought processes, and we don't realize that they had a lot more shit figured out than we do. Stuff like the connection to sun, water, wind. There's an entire, just multiple histories and multiple cultures that hold those things in very high regard. So, yeah.
And when you
feel like the presence of dopamine and other neurotransmitters is like proof that there's something beyond it. Because if you look at the stars, you get a hit of dopamine at the wonder of it all. The dopamine is there as an indicator that there's some higher reason. There's some reason for you to be looking at it. It's not, the dopamine isn't the point. The dopamine is sort of I don't know, it's programming from some higher power that indicates that, oh, we should be doing these things. It's really interesting. That's how I look at it. It's actually like learning about all this stuff, all these chemicals in the brain and whatnot, make me actually more religious in a weird way.
That's something I've noticed is people who, it's counterintuitive, but people who spend more time doing things with what you would call like the material world. So, obviously you're like homesteading, or you're dealing a lot with ingredients and cooking or whatever, tend to be the least materialist, capital M. They like, where people might think it's the other way around. It's much more like the people who are totally divorced from the land and from nature, and who are just, reading books and studying or whatever, are much more likely to be materialists in both senses, actually. So capital M, small m too.
Yeah, you definitely see that. Like the more time people consume, I think, media in general, right? Like the more time people are on social media or consuming shows or the latest outrage news cycle, the more disconnected you are from reality, the more disconnected you are from the true kind of roots of human nature, all the good and the bad. And you look at the people in my life personally, that what I consider to be the most out of touch with reality are the people that are unironically are the heaviest consumers. Like their whole life revolves around just consuming, whether it's, cheap calories or shitty media. It's just what kind of drives them. And it's Yeah, it's sad. It's sad to me. You definitely feel misunderstood by that crowd. But again, I also don't really care what they think. So
you, I think, well, we touched on it before, but you did a 5-day fast recently, right?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Yeah, 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. What's I mean, I guess one, why such a long fast? Is it like a new I guess a physical benefit you're looking for, or you're trying to push yourself, or is it a spiritual thing, or is it integration of these multiple things? And what's your experience day to day? And I haven't done a fast that long. I think the most I did was like 60 hours or somewhere around there. But what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I think I've been doing this is kind of funny. I told my wife early on, I got married stupid young, guys. I got married, I was 21, my wife was 19. And man, it lucked out. Like we are very happy, we're madly in love, wildly attracted to each other. I feel very, very blessed in my marriage. But early on, I told my wife, I said, listen, there's a good chance I'm gonna go bald, but I'll never be fat and bald. I promise you. So so I promised her I'd never be fat and bald. And then, it was funny. I was living on the North Shore of Boston, and lo and behold, man, I started gaining weight, and I wasn't really eating that healthy. But even comparatively, like I look at other people and I'm like, oh, I'm eating way healthier compared to them. But, it wasn't until I started educating myself and started realizing that, man, a lot of the stuff I'm consuming is not good for me, seed oils, empty calories, that kind of stuff. I started figuring out like, man, I got to start working out. I'm starting to get a little fat. And what was happening was I was working out, and I noticed very quickly that my recovery times are way slower. I was getting sore longer. I'd go for a 5-mile run, and I was like, man, like I can do the run, but like I'm hurting, like beyond just like a sore muscle thing, like my body aches. And that kind of, and I wasn't losing weight. I wasn't losing any weight. I was getting in better shape, but I was beating up my body. And so I started kind of researching like, man, how do I lose weight? Right? Like I'm getting fat. I'm working in a shitty office, losing my mind at the time, and starting to creep up. I was like 240 pounds, man. I was getting fat. And so my wife started researching stuff, and we were looking at like Rhonda Patrick, Dr. Jason, was it Fang or Fung or whatever, the fasting
Jason
guy,
Fung.
and started getting, yeah. And we started researching fasting. And so that's how I got into fasting. It was a purely health motivated thing. And it worked. Like I started doing I started doing a 48-hour fast every month and starting to clean up what I was eating, clean up my diet. And I started just shedding weight. Like it was slow, I wasn't just shedding it, I guess, but over the course of a couple of years, I began dropping weight at a pretty good rate. And so then I started changing. As I lost weight, I found fasting to be harder, as my body fat dropped. And so I started thinking of different ways to fast that would feel better, especially like I work a very physical job now. And so I had to be conscientious of that. It wasn't a spiritual thing. I've tried to make it a spiritual thing, and it just feels fake and contrived to me, which I'm sure is a personal thing. It's not like that's just the way it is. So I do a 5-day fast every fall. I do a 5-day fast every spring, and then I'll sprinkle in, like I did a 2-day fast after Thanksgiving, just because I gorged myself on pie and all kinds of good stuff like that. So it's not spiritual. I would like it to be. Maybe it is, in the sense that it's I don't really realize it, but it's mostly just about physical health. It definitely does recenter my mind. I definitely find that when I'm coming off a 5-day fast, I have like zero sugar cravings for weeks after. I call it like a hard reset. Yes, it's a hard.
Is there a certain point on like after day 3 is just 2 more days is not a big deal, or like you get to that 5th day and you're like, I really need to eat type of thing?
For me, the first day and a half is always the hardest, and I get a buddy, he's probably going to listen to this podcast, but he does a 5-day fast as well. And we try to do it at the same time. It's the first 48 hours we found is the hardest. And then once your body kicks into ketosis, you seem to just cruise, and by day 5, I could honestly go. I feel like I could go a week. Yeah, I feel great. My day 4 and 5 are my best days. I'll even work out sometimes. I'll hit the sauna. I think that fasting really is kind of a skill. Like the more I do it, the more efficient I seem to become at it. The more I learn like what foods to kind of pick at as I'm coming off a fast. But yeah, it's the first 48 hours. After that, you can cruise through it.
Mm-hmm.
So
how do you notice your sleep during that length of time? Does it change at all, or is it harder to wake up, or is it easier?
It's weird. I don't know. This is gonna sound kind of weird. If any guys dabbled with psychedelics,
yeah,
like mushrooms, he's giving the hesitant nod there in the video.
Yeah, we can cut in here.
I'm on mushrooms right now. No, I'm just kidding. I noticed that this is gonna sound really bizarre, but after like 48 hours of fasting, when I sleep, it's almost as if, and I've dabbled with mushrooms before, obviously, and I feel like I get a very similar sleep as I do when I'm on mushrooms. It's like I have the craziest dreams. It feels like I'm kind of in and out of reality. It can be very, very hard to snap out of it and wake up. Once I'm up, I feel good. I can usually cruise, and I usually don't feel sluggish until later in the day. But I have crazy dreams when I fast, man. It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. I mean, there's a lot going on, I think, hormonally in your body when you're starving yourself of calories like that. So maybe that's a unique experience to me. But, yeah.
Do those dreams stay with you from those times? Like, did it end up being like something that you think about and ruminate on, like, or it's just you notice it at the
time? Not really.
About them.
Yeah, not really. A lot of it's just like kind of nonsensical. So like I don't have any like deep, profound dreams where I come out of it and I'm like, man, I just learned something deeper about the reality around me.
That's only Kevin.
Yeah, no, I'm done with my dreams.
I wish I had that.
I'm happy to talk about somebody else's mushroom dreams instead of my ones. I didn't even have mushrooms as an excuse. But if you've got your own cows, I suppose you're creating a paradise for new mushroom growth anyway.
You know, I probably could, but I haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet. You know, luckily when you're in Vermont, you're around a bunch of stoners and hippies anyway. So should you decide to go that route, they're always available. But yeah, I mean, on that vein, our cows have really become the backbone of fertility on our homestead. You know, where all the bedding from the wintertime when they're in the barn, we compost that gets spread back out in our fields, all our garden beds. You know, if there's any kind of waste milk, we'll spread that back out. So yeah, cows are definitely kind of the backbone of fertility on our property for sure. But no, we're not growing magic mushrooms yet being the key word. No.
That could be an extra income stream.
That's for the retreat.
I have considered doing shiitakes, so we just haven't gotten it together yet.
Well, what else you got? What else did you plan on bringing up any topics yourself when you wanted to come on here?
No, you know, I just figured I'd kind of leave it like an AMA. I figured you guys have kind of followed me long enough to kind of pick my brain about whatever topics you want. And I mean, it's plenty to choose from, whether it's like homesteading or being a father of 4 or, you know, it's funny because I think a lot of my Twitter is mostly just like I started my Twitter account years and years ago. And for me, it was like I was in my mid-20s and I'm like, God, like my entire career has gone in a different direction. I don't value my career. I just want to find a job I can tolerate. I want to get the hell out of a city. And so I kind of went on Twitter. I was also at this crisis of faith where I just accumulated a couple of theological degrees and then was trying to figure stuff out. So I started this Twitter account. And it was literally just to follow people that I thought were smarter than me and to learn from them. And from there, it kind of snowballed. And one of my tweets went viral at one point. All of a sudden, I woke up one day and had like hundreds of more followers and immediately locked my account. I was like, this isn't why I'm on here. So it's it's funny though, it became for me a way to like culturally critique culture without necessarily doing it all on whatever like hot cultural topics are at the forefront of our existence. Like I'm not following the Rittenhouse trial. I don't give a shit about that kind of stuff. But there are broader cultural movements that I wanted to critique, and also I wanted to just learn from people from a wide range of stuff, from health and fitness to posture to homesteading to just people that had kind of a contrarian voice and figuring out why they were holding the positions that they had. So that's kind of why it all started. So now I'm on a podcast about psychophysical stuff, and that's where it's kind of at. So
yeah, that's why I was excited for you to come on, because we'd been talking about like relationships between mind, body, spirit kind of thing, but we hadn't really talked about environment and how a sense of place and what's going on around you is then interacting and affecting mind, well, what we normally think of as mind, body, spirit. Can you talk about that? What's your experience been of how, as you've got more into homesteading and more as the environment around you changed, how that's changed other parts of your life?
You mean sense of place in general, I think is again, I think I begin that from like a cultural critique, right? Like we're in this incredibly transient society where everybody moves all the time. We're very disconnected from nature. There's been this atomization of the family, of community. Most people don't know what a community is. Most people don't even know their neighbors. And so, my wife grew up and she moved like 7 or 8 times throughout her childhood. She was constantly being uprooted. And very early on, we both were like, we want to settle down in a place where we can develop a sense of place and put down roots, literally and metaphorically. And so we did. It took us a while to get there, but how it changed us, I think a lot of it comes back to your connection to nature and the connection to the people around you. And, for being out-of-staters, everyone in Vermont calls people that aren't from Vermont flatlanders, right? They're kind of looked down upon. They're kind of like, some fucking asshole from Massachusetts. But having grown up rural, I was able to kind of get into this community, and the sense of place, I think, comes down to 2 things. It comes down to your connection to nature and the connection to the people around you. And we have a small circle, but a very deep circle of people that are very connected to the land and very connected to each other in community. And we feel very, very blessed to have that. And so sense of place, it's not necessarily a physical location thing. It has to be rooted, I think, in a connection to nature and a connection to community. And I see people follow me on Twitter that are like doomsday prepper types, and they're all about being self-sustainable as much as possible. And I don't think that's the answer at all. I think if you're focusing on being completely self-sustainable and you're stocking up on AR-15s and 223 ammo, that when that period of time, if it comes, you're going to be sorely disappointed, because I think the people that are going to survive and are going to find true meaning in life are the people that have the community around them, that people are helping each other out. People are suffering together. People are experiencing beauty together. People are supporting each other through the shitty times and the good times. Sharing resources in a profound way. That to me all goes back to a sense of place. Like ultimately, like humans are longing for home, right? Like I think Keith hit on that earlier. It saddens me because I think I was very blessed to grow up in an area where I was connected to my land, connected to my community. And I think a vast majority of people in our modern developed world don't have any of that. And so it's, you see people grasping at straws constantly trying to get back to that. And maybe that I'm doing that a bit as well. But it is a psychophysical, spiritual thing, is to possess a sense of place and to cultivate it. And I don't know if that answers your question, or if you need to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just noticed for myself from between when I go between Scotland and, well, the Highlands is quite different, obviously, from the rest of Scotland. But from going from the Highlands to Cyprus, my mind is just different. Just a different. I don't know. There's just a different tone to my conscious awareness that's beyond just, like LARPing. I'm in a new place, I'm going to pretend to be a med now. It's just something that it just happens. And even like a day before I travel, so like I'm not like a big planner of traveling. I don't think about it at all. I know I'm going or whatever on some level, but it's like I have like a kind of 24-hour time delay or something. And just before then I suddenly go, oh, I'm going to the next place. And then suddenly I just start getting interested in other things that's related to the place I'm about to go to. It's very weird. And it's like a happening to me thing. So I don't know what level that is. Just going by the books I'll read in the Highlands are just completely different than the books I'll read here. And there's just like, it flips in a day or two. It just flips. It's really weird.
The book you're drawn to.
Well, the last time I was in the Highlands, it was all kind of like Norse mythology, that kind of stuff. And because where I'm from is like, it's in the sagas, it's they don't name the place, but there's a remote beach nearby that's named by Vikings, and that whole area, it's covered in a couple of the sagas where they travel around, when they're going around to Ireland. And so that kind of stuff's in the land there. You feel it. And I used to have dreams actually when I was younger of like a lone Viking guy on a boat washed up on the shore there when I was younger, and that kind of all stayed with me. But then as soon as I come here, I've just no interest in that at all. And it's not, in some ways, it's not that different. The land here it's kind of obviously surrounded by water here as well, and the land itself's kind of harsh, rugged. It's not like fertile here. It's quite dry. This part of Cyprus, anyway. It's different in the north. But and where I'm from, the Highlands is really rugged. It's just like a rock with a few bits of grass poking out of it. And I just the difference from the difference mentally is just, it's amazing from the different places. And I've come back and forward enough times now to know it's like a real thing. I'm not just imagining it. It's not just something to say, it's a real thing. So I can see how.
I mean, you go to a beach town.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. What did you ask?
I was just saying that happens on the micro level. You could go from inland to a beach town, and
right,
for lack of a better word, the vibe is totally different there. It's not just the people; it's you go there and something in the air.
Yeah, and you can just imagine if a group of people in this place are just going to change and be different from a group of people in that place, even if they all came from not that long ago, the same place. And then obviously their biology and everything's going to start changing, and it all ties into the same thing. And then your understanding of, like we were talking about earlier, the sky and the weather and the things around you is going to change, and that's going to play back into the food you're eating, which is going to change your biology again. And everything is interconnected.
Yep.
Does your girlfriend, when she goes, does she go with you back to Scotland at all?
Yeah, she's been a few times. Yeah.
Is that like when she's there and she goes back to? Is she from Cyprus, or is it like?
Yeah, she's half Cypriot. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering what her connection was like when she goes from Scotland to back home. You know what I mean? Like if that's like she kind of experiences the same thing.
To be honest, I prefer it here more than she does. She actually prefers the cooler. She prefers the UK climate actually. We lived in the southwest of England, and it's really quite wet and dark a lot of the time, but really nice in the summer, really green. And it's I just wanted to get out there. It was just too dark for me, and then Twitter took control of my brain. I need to get to the sunlight, need to get to the sun, because everyone's talking about the sun, and so then I got to the sun, and it did make a big difference to me getting in the sunlight. But I've been here long enough now. The honeymoon period of here is gone now. I see equally the good and the bad of living here. It's like there's no LARPing left of me now. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Sun, the whole going back to the sun thing's funny, man. Like we have, it's a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of darkness. Like I've worked in Alaska before. That was fucking dark. But like down here, you have these long winters, shorter days. Like right now the sun's rising after 7 and it's dark at like 4:30. And I'll find that come like February, I'll do like any excuse I can to be in the sun, like any excuse. If it's like 25 and sunny, I'll have my shirt off outside just to like try to soak it in. It's it is funny how that like becomes a driving force for me. And I feel like I'm a lot happier if I can just get any kind of sunshine, as long as it's not windy, get any kind of sunshine for 20, 30 minutes. Definitely affects my mood and my outlook on the day for sure.
Yeah, and going back to the Vikings, I mean, their sun god is a goddess, so it's female. So they're chasing the sun.
Yeah. Last year, it's kind of a funny story. Last year it was like March. We had a day. It was like the first day had gotten up to like, it was like 28 degrees and sunny. It's been cold for weeks. And I told my wife, said, man, I'm just gonna get naked. I'm gonna lay right in the front steps. I don't care, man. I'm gonna get some sun. She's like, yeah, go for it. So I'm laying on the steps. I got a towel down, butt naked. My legs are hanging off the front steps. And my wife goes, I'm gonna go get the mail. We have a very long driveway. It's like a quarter of a mile. So I'm like, all right. So she goes walking up the driveway, and I'm laying there just getting sun, just loving life. Kids are doing something. They're off. And I hear her walking through the snow up to me. I had my eyes closed and think anything of it. And all of a sudden I hear, and I open my eyes, and there's a FedEx guy standing there with a package like 10 feet in front of me. And I'm just sitting there balls out. And I'm like, oh, sorry, man. I just kind of took my shirt and kind of tossed it over myself. And he's standing there holding the package, and he goes, no, man, good for you. Good for you. And so there's this awkward silence. I'm still laying there, and he's kind of standing there, and he goes, where do you want me to leave this? I said, you can just put it right there. He's like, okay. And puts it down and walked away. Never heard the guy drive up, never heard the guy, pull in, anything. But yeah, man, it comes like springtime. That sun just starts getting a little higher in the sky, and it's like drives me.
That FedEx guy has a Twitter account now asking everybody every day if they've sand their balls today or not.
Yeah, my wife said that. Yeah, if they're a FedEx driver, they're probably seeing way more scandalous things than that. So,
yep, part of the job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Precisely. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention, so like we were talking about this sense of place, or like how you go somewhere and it's got a different vibe. Around where I live, there's all these little beach towns, and each town is like 2 miles long or something like that. So, and they're all right next to each other. And you wouldn't think that within whatever, 10, 20 miles, there's 5 or 6 towns. And you wouldn't think that it's like that different, but as soon as you get into each little town, it's got its own vibe, and like the type of people that are there change slightly. And the type of restaurants you find there are slightly different, and all that. So even in such like a condensed area like that, each place has its own feeling or like a spirit to it. Even within whatever, a 10-mile radius. So there's something to that I don't know, the town holds a spirit, the people in the town hold a spirit, the landscape can hold a spirit. I remember another time too, I was driving to visit, my aunt and uncle live in like Western North Carolina. So I live in New Jersey. I was driving down, and I got past DC, and then all of a sudden like the style of driving changes dramatically once you get into like rural Virginia all the way down to North Carolina. And people, it's just not my style, not what I'm used to from
driving like an asshole, don't you, Keith?
And then, no, I actually drive really nice. It's them that drive like assholes.
He does. Look at him. He looks guilty.
No, I drive well.
In a rush to get to the cranberries.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And as I'm coming back, so I spent like a week down there, a weekend or something. And as I'm coming back, and I finally get to like the Beltway around DC, and everybody starts driving like me again. And I'm like, all right, I'm finally coming back onto like my home turf, because I just like, it was way more chaotic on the road. People like cutting across lanes and everything, and it was a shit show, really, if you drive around the DC Beltway. But to me, that was like, that's what I understood. It's like what I'm used to. So even that, like, it's a weird thing. It's like the mannerisms even that people have when they're driving. It's what you feel comfortable with. And I think that comes back to your sense of community, your sense of region. You don't realize how much alike you are to the people from your immediate community until you go somewhere else, and then you could even see the differences. I mean, people can look similar or they buy the same stuff and all that, but there's very much like a spirit to different regions, and it really comes out, or you only notice it when you go to somewhere else and then come back to see the differences, how subtle they are too. But I think that's a cool thing about traveling, is you get to see how things change throughout the country.
East Coast too, there's something about this. It's just such a high, fast-paced vibe on like the coastal East Coast. Yeah, like it's wild, you know. And it's like I go down to Massachusetts to visit family every once in a great while. And I went from like, you know, growing up rural to then driving up and down the East Coast from like Philadelphia to Boston, and driving through, you know, all this crazy. I don't know, you drive on the East Coast, exactly what you're talking about, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And now being in Vermont, you know, I make it down there once or twice a year, and I'm like white knuckling it, man. Like I'm driving in my car, I'm like 3 lanes of traffic, and I'm like, I'm freaking out now, you know. And it takes a couple days to kind of get back into that vibe where I can feel like I can drive like a mass hole again, right? Because I'm from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
But it's funny, like the first couple of days, I'm white knuckling it, 2 hands at 10 and 2. We're driving on the highway, praying to God. It's funny, but yeah.
I think about that too, because I mean that there's so much congestion where I live, and the highways are just everybody's going 80 miles an hour and they're right on top of each other. And I think about it, and it's like I could literally be like 30 seconds away from a terrible car crash, and it's not a pleasant thought to have at all, but it does cross your mind often. And there's actually, oh man, I got so amped up one time. I was on my way to a volleyball game not this past summer, but the summer before, and I was in the left lane, so that's a fast lane here, and somebody all of a sudden just pulled off the side of the highway, like slowed down from 80 down to like 30 in a very short period of time. And the car immediately in front of me spun out, and I pulled off to the side, just like I didn't even have time to think about it. It was just a reaction, and I probably missed the car that was spinning out in front of me by like it felt like feet, like 6 feet or something like that. And my heart's pumping, the adrenaline's pumping and all that. And I remember doing that and then having such like a intense appreciation for nothing having happened. Like I didn't get in an accident. The car in front of me spun out. He ended up, I think, spinning. He ended up facing backwards, but there was no one behind us. So he just turned around and kept going. And then everybody went about their day. It was so strange, but like the intensity of emotion in that moment was like, it gave me such an appreciation for like, I don't know, what do you call it? Like just being alive or having such luck at that point. And I remember just being super amped up because the adrenaline for the rest of the day. I think I played really well in that game too because of that. But yeah, I don't even know how I got on that, but it was, I mean, you don't realize how quick it all could like be over. And I don't know, driving on New Jersey roads makes you appreciate that. Maybe that's my point. I don't know.
It's like one of those things where it's like hours of monotony followed by like moments of sheer terror.
Yeah, exactly. I mean? Right.
Like,
yeah.
And those moments you learn. It's amazing how fast you learn in those like few brief moments where you have a close call, like how much you can learn about life compacted into like 3 seconds. Like literally we're talking seconds, not minutes, seconds.
Yeah.
How fast you can learn, you know, it's profound, you know. Yeah.
Keith, did you get that time slowing down effect happen to you? Did you have like a couple of seconds?
Absolutely.
You're really aware.
Yeah. So yeah, like Jesse just mentioned, it was probably a few seconds where it took like where that all happened in less than, I don't know, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. But if like to me, and my car has this thing where it's like, if you come up too quickly on the car in front of you, it says brake, and it'll like flash a thing at you. And I think I reacted quicker than that was able to react. And it felt like 5 minutes was happening where I pulled off to the side and like just missed. But yeah, the time dilation thing was real in that moment. And I don't know. That's really a stupendous thing about like your ability to adapt so quickly. It's like you don't even realize what part of yourself is, because it's not your thinking mind that's doing that. Like I couldn't have thought that quickly to do it. It's purely reactionary. And I think, I had written a tweet about that a while ago, and it came up again recently. I think I was talking with Eric and Matt about time differences, and the point I was making was that it's really the amount of information that you're taking in. Like when time slows down, it really means like you're saturating the amount of information that your brain's taking in that moment, and that's why it's slowing down. Is because there's so much more that you are experiencing. Yeah. And then when time seems to speed up, you're actually taking in less information, like because you're just able to process it so much more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I've had friends that have experienced like a lot of combat, and particularly like urban combat in the Middle East and stuff. And one of the things that one buddy was saying was when you're going in, you're like clearing a house, like your entire world is like 1.5 to 2 seconds ahead of you. Like that's it.
Wow.
And how you get this like hyper clarity, like nothing else beyond 1.5 to 2 seconds ahead of you matters, right? Like nothing else matters right now. Like you're not thinking about your wife, you're not thinking about your kids, you're not thinking about anything other than like what's around the next door, what's behind the next door, what's beyond the next hallway, and how that slows down time and kind of gives you this like hyper focus, which I think is similar, right? Like it's like and that's like you talk to like adrenaline junkies and stuff like that, and it's like the same thing when these guys are, whether you're base jumping or you're bombing down a hill on a mountain bike or something like that. It's like you only have the next second ahead of you, and that's all you're dialed in on, and what that does to your brain. I was commercial fishing one time. I fell into a fish hole at the bottom of the boat. We were catching some bad weather, and I went to go put the hatch on the boat. We took a hell of a wave, and I went up and over the side, and I fell about 12 feet straight down to the bottom of this fish hole. And I remember it was weird, man. It happened so quick. And I remember falling, my hands got tangled up in the hatch, and so I wasn't able to break my fall with my hands. I remember falling straight down. I remember that like second and a half feeling like ashamed. Like I remember feeling like incredibly embarrassed that this is how I was about to get like fucked up and mangled. I remember thinking distinctively, I don't want to get paralyzed. I don't want to die. I'm so embarrassed. And then I hit the ground. I was kind of like knocked unconscious. And a couple of seconds later, I like regained my consciousness, and I ended up being fine. I was concussed, but it was wild that like second and a half, how much life was compacted into that little tiny blip of my life. It was a very, very profound experience. Yeah.
It's interesting as well, the relationship between the like there's the event, and then there's the, like Keith was saying, the immediate reactions. The emotion comes later. So people kind of think the emotion, like the fear is somehow, or like the fear is somehow there before, but it really isn't. You just react. The fear comes after. It's almost like the function of the fear is to remind you later to avoid the situation that you were just in, to avoid situations like that. It's not actually to help you in the moment at all, because it's useless. If you're paralyzed by fear, you won't do something. You won't do something. So like, but then people sub for whatever reason, modern life or whatever, their own psychology, they have the fear thing that's just going all the time in daily life. It's just constantly there. It's completely useless. It's not telling you to avoid, well, maybe it is telling people to avoid something. If you're constant anxiety about your lifestyle, it's probably telling you to avoid your current lifestyle.
Yeah, you could do an entire podcast episode on anxiety.
Yeah, no,
anxiety and fear, and why I think it's growing in our society, right? Like we live most of us live very comfortable, quote unquote, materialistic lives, and yet anxiety and depression, all that stuff seems to be growing very, very rapidly and becoming more of an issue. So it's fascinating. Not a good gauge of health, I think, in our culture.
No, but they got pills for that.
Better living through chemistry, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just the constant anxiety, it just paralyzes your brain. Or just paralyzes you. It just puts you in a kind of cage, and you don't even it's hard even to notice, for people to even to notice that they're in it, because it's just affecting everything, just holding them down. But there's so many ways out of it, are indirect. They're not direct. To take the pill is the obvious thing, but there's so many other ways. I remember I was really, one time when I was younger, I was into sport and stuff when I was very young, and then I just stopped it, and started partying or whatever in the early 20s. And I remember being quite anxious and stuff, probably because of the lifestyle and not eating properly. And I remember just out of necessity, I got some part-time job and I had to walk quite a few miles to get there. And I just couldn't understand how after the walk, the anxiety had gone. And then I sort of, I understood that phrase, brushing off the old cobwebs. Do you have this phrase in the States? And I was like, it was like, I came up with that phrase, like a similar phrase for myself, and then I realized it was just a phrase that people had said for years. And it was just kind of shaking off those kind of surface level anxieties. And loads of people haven't even reached that level of awareness yet. They don't even realize that just some basic movement and some of the stuff will just go away. It's not that real.
Fresh air and sunshine should be like our first default, at least attempt at medicating ourselves. I'm convinced.
Yeah, and it's for no other reason than it's accessible to everyone, and you could just try it. There's no risk or downside to it. So there's a lot of reasons for people to have anxiety, but if the reason you're having anxiety is you're just not getting enough fresh air and sunshine, that's easily taken care of. And then if that doesn't work, then obviously move on to other things. But yeah, so that's something simple that if you experience those things, just try to get more movement, fresh air, sun, good food, whatever it may be.
You talked about this before, Keith, but anxiety is sort of like being stuck at a crossroads and just standing there, And what's the solution to being at the crossroads is movement, walk, like direction and walk. And so you talk about psychophysical, that's just about the most psychophysical thing is, a simple walk around the block might cure your anxiety because the physical
or at least help.
Is, the movement of the mind out of the stasis of anxiety can really be fixed by physical movement. It's all linked. Yeah.
I've certainly never felt worse after spending time outside and physically exerting myself. You never come back from doing that regretting it ever.
Exactly.
Ever.
Yep.
Yeah, that alone should tell people something. Even just a walk. I tweeted that recently. You never regret going for a walk that you didn't want to go for. You never go, I wish I hadn't been persuaded to go for that walk. Unless unless your house gets burgled when you're away or something, maybe you'd regret it then. But you're not going you just don't regret it. Just doesn't happen.
It's interesting though, because I'll go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's interesting because there's I don't experience this. I think I think again it's like a luck thing, or it's just the way I'm wired. But I have friends and family members that they know, if they're anxious, they feel down, they know the solution right in front of them, right? They're like, oh man, every time I go outside, physically exert myself, I feel better. But it's like that. Again, I guess it's like standing at that crossroads. It's very hard for some people to take that initial step to go outside, to go eat some clean food, or to go get some fresh air, sunshine. And I always find that fascinating. There's some people that just won't do it, and I don't know why. I think it's an ego thing.
I think it's an ego thing. I think some people, especially a overly intellectual person, will be like, it can't be that simple. It's more, my thing's more important. It's more complex than that. It can't be go for a walk in the sun. How's that? It just can't be that simple. It's because they're so separated from it. That their stuff, that their whole life is all these words in their head. They're just so separated from the bottom of the pyramid. They're right at the top. That it just can't even make sense to them. And like to just for it to work, we'd have to make them look like an idiot. That they didn't know that it was like that. But then when you do it, and you find out something like that, you don't feel like an idiot. You own it. You love it. Because you've gone back to yourself somehow. But yeah, getting the person to do the first thing is definitely the hardest, including if the person's yourself.
There is some weird brain stuff where if your serotonin function is low, serotonin is one of those things that your brain, it's like a learning neurotransmitter. A lot of people don't know. And so in order to learn that something is pleasurable and good for you, you need serotonin. And so if a lot of people don't have that function going, then they can't make the connection. They can't create a positive association with, say, a walk and feeling better, right? Because the neurons just aren't communicating. So they really have to, they have to be forced because they don't make that connection in their head. It's really interesting. But
how do you get past that hurdle?
Well, you got to look at why you're not making enough serotonin or why your receptors aren't receptive. So there's a lot of different causes. A lot of it is just, they eat shitty food, not enough protein. Protein is like it's like the substrate for making serotonin, animal protein especially. So something as simple as a steak could help. Yeah.
I had a friend who tried going
a microdose could help.
What are your thoughts on microdosing real quick? Because it's one of those things where it's like I've dabbled with microdosing a little bit and wasn't really happy with it. I feel like historically microdosing things like psychedelics, which typically have a lot to do with your serotonin receptors, if I remember correctly. Historically, people who take psychedelics do so in very large amounts and frequently, and then have these experiences or these shamanistic ritualistic practices. And now, and I called this years ago, I remember telling people like microdosing is the future, everyone's going to start doing it. I feel like we're at a point now where I know like boomers are microdosing, I know millennials that are microdosing, everybody's microdosing now. And I mean, we definitely lack the data on it, but I'm very curious as to other people's thoughts on it. Because right now, I'm not necessarily against it. It's a big question mark. We just don't know what that's going to do to your brain over the long haul,
No, I agree.
And it's not traditionally, historically, how it's been used too, which is always a red flag for me at some level.
It's definitely a red flag. But one thing I also think about is that people aren't historically in the same mental space as they used to be, So maybe even though traditionally you would just take large doses under, the protection and guidance of a shaman, maybe people are so fucked up now that you need a little weird, extra non-traditional input.
Yeah, the context
so it
is
seems to be
different.
helpful for things like depression and PTSD. That's where I've seen it used. I've used it a few times for if you ever listen to like some of those like Tim Ferriss type podcasts, people are using it for productivity, which seems kind of cheap, but I did that a few times. It seemed to help, but the thing is, something can seem to help, and is it really? I mean, maybe that's how everything works. If it seems to help, it really does help. That's kind of the placebo effect. But I think it's probably pretty safe because I think the point is to do it and you don't even feel it. And so I would think it's probably safe enough, especially if you have, if it's either depression or microdosing, I would say microdosing is probably safer than just sitting with the depression or taking, antidepressants. It's a better option to try.
I think it's important. Eric, I think I've heard you make this point before, is any one of those things, or even alcohol too, any type of like mind altering substance, one, you would want to use it with some type of intention or have some type of ritual around it, not just like, not use it like a multivitamin that you would have every day, but like have a reason for it. Yeah. And it may tie back to the same thing why chopping your own wood and doing that, why that's more meaningful, is like you have intention behind it. Like there's you've imbued whatever you're doing with a little bit of that spirit of what you want the outcome to be.
Yeah.
So I don't think that those things are something that would just, unless you want to use it as a catalyst. If you are experiencing anxiety, depression, and you want to do something that, well, you know you're going to get an effect, and at the very least it's going to shift your mind in some way. Mm-hmm. So I think, one, ritualizing those experiences is important, as opposed to just doing them recreationally or as like a daily regiment type of thing.
Yeah, at least regarding psilocybin, I think one thing it does, I remember being really interested in this when I read it, is that it shuts off there's like a sort of a filter in your brain that filters sensory data, so it allows things that are important for survival, like light, sound, smell, but then the implication is that there's all this other stuff swirling around, all this other sensory data that we can't pick up on, and that this filter is filtering out. And so one thing that psilocybin seems to do is kind of inhibit that filter. So it allows more whatever, we don't even have a name for it because it's out there and we can't see it or sense it. So maybe there's some utility in having a very small dose, and it kind of, it releases maybe the filter on some people is so constrictive and so restrictive that it prevents anything from coming in, even stuff that's good for our survival and can help us. So maybe if you just loosen that up a little bit without even perceiving it, you're having a little more information coming in, and you can break through some kind of you can step into, you can walk through the crossroads. So, but it's all, who knows? Who the hell knows?
Yeah, that's why I mean, we've talked about this before, but we're all very big on experimentation, and there's a lot of paths that aren't right for everybody, and you kind of have to, you kind of have to go try some things yourself to see if it works for you, because that's the most important thing, is like you want to be, you want to do the things not just because other people are doing them, but because they improve you in some way. So that would make it worthwhile, and the same patterns and behaviors aren't going to work for everybody. So you really have to experiment, be safe, but experiment with these things to see how they interact with your own experience and your own life.
Totally. I mean, any of these scientific studies you see mentioned, it's always an average. They have 1,000 people on each side of the study, and it's 1,000 people, and then they just take all the results and average them out. And so, you're an individual data point. And so one guy could have a huge, reaction to something. Some guy could have the opposite reaction, but then they'd get kind of averaged out, and it looks like it's just one reaction. And so you can't really, you gotta experiment with yourself, because you're the only one that matters when it comes to things like this.
We're all funny was but as far as like the experimenting goes, it's funny because when I was 20, I feel like I was in a place where I at least had enough foresight, thankfully, where I didn't experiment with a lot of that stuff, because I figured I couldn't handle it, in a sense where, I feel like I have an addictive personality, and I feel like, not that like psilocybin's addictive. Psilocybin's one of those things where I could theoretically keep pounds of that stuff around and not be tempted to reach for it. But I think it comes down to seasons of life too. Like I'm at a point now where I feel like I can safely experiment with certain things that I'm not sure I was either ready for emotionally or mentally or whatever when I was 20, 25 years old. Now approaching 40, it's kind of a different ball game. It's just and my thought process I think is a bit different now than it was when I was a young man. But yeah, I definitely don't think that playing around with certain drugs, you know, whether it was like MDMA or psilocybin or whatever, then I was 20 years old would be a wise choice for me then. Whereas I don't think my life would go off the rails and out of control now should I decide to go down that road, kind of a thing.
Yeah, things just affect you, just affect the one person differently at different stages in their life, and they're in a different context, a different place, different things going on. And it's one of the most annoying things about Twitter, actually, is it really amplifies this human thing that people have where they find something that works for them and then they can't help themselves but generalize it to everybody. Judgmental, and everyone has to do this one thing and they should do this thing that worked for them. And it's really dangerous, you know, like lots of people, probably most people should not take a large amount of some of those things ever. It's probably bad for them. Some people have all come out the other side and it's better for them, but they'll then tell everyone else that they should do it too. And it's you know, it's the same for everything.
Yeah. Twitter definitely rewards like absolute statements, you know, statements made without any kind of wavering or hesitancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it has a good kind of
over certainty too.
It has a good control mechanism built in, though, where people can put side by side the tweets from one person saying this thing then and this thing now. But it doesn't really stop anyone. No one, it's not preventing anyone from just keep doing it. This is the thing now. This is the thing now. I mean, there's some people, it's just all they do, and they're absolutely certain about each thing.
I'm probably way guilty of that too.
You're guilty of it?
I'm sure. Like it's something that I've written down in the past, and then I've said the complete opposite like a year later or whatever. So I don't know, you try to be consistent, but I think, I don't know, you get into certain frames of mind where something just makes sense at the time. And you,
but
you write
the way you do it is different, Keith. So the way you do it is exploratory and experimental and playing, whereas some people do it as judgmental. It's you idiots, you're not doing this thing that works for me now. Only idiots don't do this thing. You know, I really hate that. So it's like a different thing, and I don't know, maybe there's personality types or something. I have no idea. But
you do see that the most among like three things though. It's like politics, religion, and health. Like those are the three topics that I see that stuff happen like all the time, you know. And I think there's something to that too. Like why are those three categories that people get the most like almost like fundamentalist and ridiculous about, you know, and then at the most hypocritical,
the most insecure about.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's people, again, it goes back to this like dopamine hit. When you put something in an absolute statement and someone's gonna like it and share it a bunch of times, it almost pushes people to do that more, right? To continue making those statements and kind of go with whatever cultural winds are blowing. It's part of the reason I locked my account many years ago. Like I don't want my stuff shared in the sense that like I don't need that to be a thought of like I don't ever want to post something with the intention of it being retweeted a bunch of times. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I think that's, for me at least, like, I don't ever want that temptation to be there, but yeah, I think it's people go with whatever the cultural winds are blowing, and it's easy to do, and it's easy to get that dopamine fix, and it drives people to post even more ridiculous stuff. And if that means contradicting yourself from 6 months or a year ago, people are going to do that because they're going to chase that ego. And, it's really a cultural phenomenon that's very broad. You know, I mean, we see that everywhere. You know, it's not just in a little corner of Twitter. It's really a cultural. It's a human nature thing. I think at the end of the day, more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to separate yourself from that. I mean, the few of my tweets that have gotten any type of notoriety. One, I find myself like that happens and I'm like constantly checking again. Oh, did I get any more comments or something like that? And then I a little bit of time passed. I was like, wow, that was awful. I should have just threw my phone away for like the rest of the day because one, it just ruins the rest of your day. You're just checking your phone for At least for me, it does. And it wasn't that much fun. It was fun for a little while, but damn, it feels like you have to stop for a while, because it was you get yourself in some weird situation where it's like you're not in control of actually being intentional with your time. It's all just I don't know, some weird thing happens in your mind where you just want to check over and over and over again. It's not good.
It's such a weird state of mind that I don't think has ever happened. I don't think it's ever been available to man. I mean, that sort of on demand, like, oh, these people are, they like what I said. But you don't really get that. I mean, maybe you have somebody, like you give a speech somewhere in the town square and people are clapping or something, but just to have it constantly, it must create such a weird sort of environment in the brain.
Very little accountability.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you can, if you sit in the town square and you say something that's really, fucking stupid, you're going to have your neighbors and the people in your community being like, well, that guy's an idiot, or that, there's more of a, I think there's more of a, it's more consequential, right? And in today's day and age, you can throw anything out there. And even if you like right now, the whole cancel culture thing, you can go tweet something ridiculously racist and get canceled. Well, then, a week later, everyone forgets about it and they move on to the next thing. And so it creates this environment where there's like very little accountability or consequences, long-term consequences to what you're putting out there, which is a little scary if you think about it.
Yeah. You don't have to live with the people is the thing.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that in your whatever, at the market on the corner, and your neighbors are here, and you're like, this guy's crazy. Like, what's going on here? And you got to see them every day. So that's a little bit different of a thing. Whereas
they know if you're bullshitting. They know if you're just saying stuff that isn't true. Because you
have to
see
like,
them and you
guy,
have to cringe.
He doesn't have a Lamborghini. He's got a fucking Honda.
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, I'm just imagining a guy in the corner, telling people to sun their balls.
He doesn't sun his balls. I've never seen him sun his balls.
I'm gonna start. I'm gonna become an evangelist. I'm gonna have the sandwich board with a hole cut out by my balls with a bullhorn. I'm gonna be on the corner just preaching about getting sun on your balls and getting that vitamin D fix, and it's gonna be great.
So you're never gonna get any more packages delivered to your house.
Yeah, surprisingly, they still come and they still put them right on the front step from time to time. I'm shocked. So I haven't scared them off yet.
They didn't leave a note or something. Be careful when you approach this man's house.
Not yet. Yet being the key word there. We actually just had a package stolen from our the mail lady puts our packages at her mailbox, and it was funny. I bought some mineral supplements. My wife did online, and it said they arrived and they never came, which we didn't think anything of it. We're like, whatever, that happens sometimes. We live very rural, and like a week went by, and we kind of figured out, we're like, man, I think someone stole them. And a couple days after we figured out that someone stole them, like I was infuriated. I was like, oh, there's something about someone stealing something from you that you feel so violated. You feel so like when someone personally steals, you don't know who the person is, but you feel so violated. It's enraging to me, right? Like I want to kick this person's ass. I still have an idea who did it, but a neighbor found our package a couple miles on another road down the road, torn open. And it was funny because it was obviously, I'm pretty sure it was a deer hunter who was road hunting, just driving around looking for deer. And they saw the package hanging off our mailbox and they swiped it. They got a couple miles down the road, pulled over and opened it. And they took what ended up being like $150 in mineral supplements and just tossed them on the ground. And they kept the shitty little plastic shaker that you shake the stuff in and threw out all the stuff of value. And so my neighbor came along and she was on a walk and she saw this stuff laying in a ditch and found the old wet box with our address on it and collected it up and brought it back to us. And it was just kind of funny. It was like, they took the least thing of value in it and then threw out all this stuff that they probably could have sold on eBay for a decent amount of coin.
Yeah.
Or gotten healthy with.
What's that?
Or it could have gotten more healthy had they taken a supplement.
Well, there's the power of community right there,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was a good way. Like I didn't really know that neighbor that well. I knew her in passing, but now it's like, I was like, man, you feel like, man, the lady's got my back. She didn't have to do that. She didn't have to take the time to gather this stuff up and come to my house, but she did. And it's kind of like this deep mutual respect. It started off like you're seeing red and you want to murder the jackass that stole your stuff. And then after it ends with this kind of paradox of like, wow, like we have people a mile down the road from us that are genuinely good people that care about you, and it was kind of it was a needed experience for sure.
I mentioned my uncle before, who lives in like Western North Carolina, my aunt and uncle, and before that they lived in Florida, and they said they live in a place where like it's pretty remote. They're in like the mountains, so like their closest neighbor is like a half a mile away or even more, like a mile away or something. And they said they actually feel more of a sense of community living there than when they did live in Florida, when their neighbor they had like a next door neighbor, like the house was whatever, 100 yards away or whatever. And there's something to that, living in a more remote area. I think people have to look out for other people to a greater extent, because there's so few people in that area that you have to depend on. You can't just go to anyone. You have to make good relationships and be able to depend on the people that will be around should you need them. Lots of times you can't just call the police or fire department or something like that to help you out, or it'll take a really long time to get to you.
Yeah, a few summers ago we had there's a guy working on a gate down below my house, and he was like welding, or he was like cutting an iron bar, and a spark flew over his shoulder. He didn't realize, and this is in the summer, and it caught fire. It's California, so everything's flammable. So the whole like hillside was on fire, and of course we called the fire department, but they got there in like 25 minutes. Which if we had just stopped and like said, oh, we called the fire department, we're done, we'll wait for them, like the whole forest would have been engulfed. So but people were just stopping, neighbors came by, and we put it out. And it's like the thing is, in a place like that, is people just have, they had shovels in their trucks, they had fire extinguishers. So yeah, people kind of know that they have to be prepared, and they're willing to pitch in. So that was kind of a cool experience. That was very early on after we'd moved in, and it was kind of cool to see that people were kind of like that, because we came from the suburbs where, you don't really know your neighbors. Yeah,
you see that a lot out here. It's funny because everything's like so politicized and politically divisive now, where you have you get the MAGA chuds and the hyper progressive people, and at the same time, like we live so rural that they might have bumper stickers or signs in their yard, but guess what? When your car goes off the road, you're going to have to walk to the nearest house, which is some guy with a MAGA sign in his front yard, and he's going to have to pull you out,
Yeah.
And so I think it kind of tempers people a bit, where, it's, you have to help each other out, or else. And if you don't, word spreads so quickly that you're that asshole, right? Like in a small town, word spreads fast. So at the end of the day, it's funny, like you can have these deep political and almost cultural divides, but it's also like, oh yeah, that guy, oh, he pulled me out of the ditch last winter, or oh yeah, like I was short a quart of firewood and this guy helped me out at the last minute, and or vice versa, right? There's all these examples of that, and it's I think it's healthy. I think it's really good that people you're almost forced to depend on each other, because again, the fire department, the cops, the tow truck could be hours out, it's just, you have to depend upon each other at some level, and in very little subtle ways that sometimes you wouldn't think of. I think it gives people a much better mutual respect for each other at the end of the day. It's like you might not agree with that person, but that person's going to help you out if like the shit hits the fan. And that's a very deep sense of peace in a way.
Yeah. Keith and I were talking about this earlier. Is I think friendship is such a powerful force, because where I live, I have a bunch of friends that live in the area. We all have, our kids all go to the same school, and we don't talk about politics, but I just know that we're pretty much diametrically opposed. But I also know that if anything were to go down, they would have my back and I theirs, you know. And I think that kind of that community, that friendship can kind of bridge almost any gap. Yeah.
And all of these kind of real life interactions are like that are putting cracks into the online echo chambers that everybody's going into and dividing them. And then this is like they're now the guy who's on there going, no, actually I've met a guy who's one of them and he wasn't so bad. And so there's like a voice of reason in the group and stuff. So it's important.
Yeah. And you know, the most powerful thing is these guys I was talking about, they're on social media and they're just kind of on the other side, and they're, you know, really, they're very political on there, but yet, and they know where I stand, at least regarding some things. And, you know, because they know me as a human and I know them, it doesn't feel like a Twitter interaction, you know. They're cool.
Yeah. The thing about, sorry, Eric, what were you saying?
I was just saying it could pierce, you know, any kind of hysteria that you generate for yourself being on social media.
Yeah, I was going to say that the thing about being online, most of the time you need something to talk about. Like you need it to be topical. You need to have an opinion, and a lot of people form an identity that way about the stance that they're going to have on a certain topic. So it's driven towards more of that fracturing of people, but it's not like, that's obviously, it's not the same case in reality. It's more about shared values, I think, that you have with people, more of a human connection. And that's why I see things like this, the metaverse or whatever that's coming out, and people are talking about. It's just another topic, really, like for people to pick a side or have an opinion about. And even if it does become something, you're going to have to find yourself in some type of topical cache with other people in that place. So it continues to progress down more of the where's my tribe type of thing, as opposed to I can communicate with anybody if we kind of have shared values. So it's a poor surrogate for real friendship.
I think online you have a profile, you know what I mean? In every sense of the word. You have in real life you're more of a fluid being, whereas online you can be characterized by your people you follow, people you interact with, you know, everything can be quantified. And so you become you do get pigeonholed into this actual identity or a profile, or it's a lot more fluid in the real world.
Yeah, because in real life you can get that kind of thing where you know someone really well in this context and you know this other person really well in this other context, and they're very different. Then for some reason all the paths are crossed in one place, and there's that the very first moment is you feel a moment of weirdness for you, because you're like, you have there's this kind of relationship, and then this one, and it takes a few seconds, or depends on the people obviously, to kind of settle into this now three-person relationship. Online, obviously, you don't have that. That's like a psychophysical thing. You need to be in the room. If you're like with somebody, you're forced to be more nuanced about the person's what they say than you are if it's just abstracted words, obviously on a list. You're going down the list, projecting all your states of mind onto what you read. Whereas when you're in the room with someone, you're kind of, in some level, you're having to come out of your own state of mind in order to function in a conversation or whatever. And also, I think a lot of people are just on Twitter that you don't really realize a lot of the dicks are just drunk. But in real life, you would see someone was drunk, you know they're drunk and they're a dick. But on Twitter, I think a lot more people are drunk a lot of the time than we realize.
Drunk right now.
Just to get there you go. There's one of them in here. We've been infiltrated.
They're drunk. They're drunk, or they're on Adderall or modafinil or something.
Yeah.
A lot of altered states happening.
I think it's kind of important to like, I mean, I obviously hold to some relatively controversial views that would be, most, I call them normies, would kind of freak out about it. But at the same time, it's like I try to remain anonymous online as much as what I can to some extent. But I also do feel like it's relatively important to be who you are online as in real life. Like, I don't hold to any views that I would not share with my grandmother, or a family member. That doesn't mean that I'm not shrewd in how I present myself publicly. I have a job. I have people in the community that I'm just like, yeah, I'm not going to go there with them because it's not worth it. Yeah. The outfall could be costly, but overall, I think it's important to try to hold that same vibe in real life as you do online. Like, I'm not trying to hide anything. If people ask me where my stance is on particular things, I'll tell them. Generally speaking, I try to avoid all political topics, and yeah, that seems to be helpful. Also, once you kind of check out on people, once you're like, oh, I don't follow like mainstream media, and I don't really belong to any tribe. I'm not on your political spectrum. It pretty much, people are like, huh, and they either move on or they get curious.
Yep.
But there is something to being as much as who you can be in real life as you are online that I feel like is important, because it's just this very false, you truly see someone's ego on their social media accounts, right? Like, because it's completely unfiltered, and it gives people this false sense of bravado and confidence and keyboard courage. And it's just, yeah, it's the wild west of human emotions and ego, right? Like, it's kind of nuts.
One thing I was just thinking about recently is when I was writing, I was noticing I was writing in words that I don't speak. I was writing in phrases that I wouldn't use. So like I naturally would go to write it is, or, when I would just say it's normally. So I'm trying to now more just write how I would speak it, because I was looking and going, it's not real. That's not really what I'm saying. That doesn't sound anything like how I would say it. Well, I speak with a lot of apostrophes, but I tend to not write because it's better writing, but it's just, unnatural.
Well, you want to use your R's or T's or whatever.
I know I'm not gonna pronounce the T in the middle of
the T's.
The bird up name. There's already one T. That's enough.
I should have done this entire podcast by dropping my R's like my townie family members down in Massachusetts.
So we'll get rid of the middle T's in the bird up name and the R at the end. So we just got Twi.
Yeah,
we'll keep the first T. Twi's fine.
I think for as much as like you never get 100% of how someone truly is by just their online profile, but you could get a really good idea, like who the people that are just like you just don't want to interact with at all, and you can get a sense of someone just from the way they interact online. To an extent. I mean, you never get the full story, but you know who you could kind of give a little bit more trust to, or who you can open up more to, and who like you just don't want to bother with based on just how they write, react, all those things. And it's also, you could also take it like, think about like you don't have to interact with someone as a whole, but just take certain things that you have shared interests on and communicate along those lines. So you could really choose as to like how far to an extent you want to, I don't know, go back and forth with someone if you're just not going to get anywhere else with them. But yeah, my point is that you can get a sense of how someone is just by how they write, how they share themselves, how they the ideas they put out there, whether they would be actually good to talk with in person or just avoid altogether. Most people are good to talk with in person, though. You get a more I don't know, it's just better than typing back and forth.
Some people that I follow strictly for like intellectual purposes and that, or they're they're culturally incisive, right? But I know I'm like, man, I'd fucking hate this person in real life. Like they would drive me up the wall, right? So I have some people on my list that I follow for strictly those purposes. So it's funny. It's kind of a both and for me. It's like I try to follow people that I feel like kind of enrich my life, or at least try to. I don't follow many people, right? Like it was like I tried to limit the amount of people I follow to try to limit the noise, so to speak. But there's a lot of people that I follow that it's like you guys, right? It's like it's something that's contributing to your life and your benefit and your well-being, and it makes you a better person, or it gives you, things to think about, to process. There's other people that I'm just like, man, you're really smart. That's really culturally incisive. I couldn't stand you in real life. You can just almost tell, I'm like, oh God, that person's insufferable, but they're really smart, That's definitely probably the minority of people that I follow, but you can just tell. I'm telling you, you can really see people's ego. I just keep going back to that. It's just, consequences be damned kind of a thing. You can just, your ego is so prevalent in how you post overall. I think you just see people that are just being driven by the clicks, by the dopamine hits, by the internet fame. It's very, very easily nowadays. I mean, you just have to toe a certain party line and you can procure quite a bit of followers and quote unquote attention or fame. It's
well, it speaks to how inseparable they are from that part of themselves. Like they carry it with them in everything they do. And not saying I don't in some way, but it's just a reality of human nature. You always carry your ego with you.
It's gonna be fascinating how the metaverse, going back to that, changes everything, right? Like we haven't dug too deep into the metaverse, but how much more it disconnects people from reality, from nature, from going outside, from real genuine community with real genuine consequences that force you to change for the better. You know what I mean? I think that things like the metaverse, online stuff in general, reinforces some of our worst behaviors and limits us in growing in true community. It's a little scary. At the same time, I'm not terrified of it, in the sense that this is just the way human nature is. We're always going to be running up against new technologies and new things that can disconnect us as a community, disconnect us from nature. This is something you have to confront and deal with and process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no avoiding it.
Yeah, and if you avoid it, I think you can actually do more damage. Again, like it's like raising these 4 little kids right now. And it's funny because I have all these millennial friends and family members that don't have kids, and they're like, man, how can you have so many kids in today's world? That must be scary. And I'm like, have you ever read a fucking history book? Like it's always, things have been far worse throughout our history and far more chaotic and physically dangerous. That's just the way of the world, right? And it's just like, you just got to keep chugging along and find your place within that, I guess. I don't know. Do you guys have kids? I know Eric has kids. Do you, Keith, you guys have kids yet?
No.
Yeah. It's a wild ride.
Yeah. I got nephews. I got 3 nephews, but no kids myself.
Yeah. I characterize kids as the ultimate human experience. Like I have a couple of good friends that are like, I'm never having kids, man. But then they're trying to constantly, travel or do these things where it's all about the experience, and I try to tell them like, man, kids are the greatest. Kids are the ultimate human experience, in a sense, where it's a complete mind fuck, right? Like it's awesome, it's joyful, it's hard, it's emotionally taxing, physically taxing, but it's definitely the ultimate human experience, I think. And I think there's a track record of that historically, right? Like, why are you on Earth? It's like, have babies and keep going, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, even on this side of it, I can't imagine anything being in a bigger event in your own life.
Yeah,
right.
They really set you straight, It did for me.
If you're like intuitive at all, or you're striving to be intuitive, you will see like nothing exposes your flaws and characters more as a human than like dealing with your own kids, right? Like there's like times where you're like, why am I letting my 2-year-old dictate my emotions like this, right? Like this is crazy.
Okay.
And it's wild. Like if you're trying to grow, nothing will test you like kids, because like I said, you just see every flaw, every bit of impatience or all that kind of stuff. You want to come in?
No.
My wife just opened the door for a hot second and checked in.
Yeah, no one can be this long on a podcast.
What's that?
No one can be this long on a podcast. So assuming this must be finished by now.
Today's my day off, so that wasn't necessarily a hurry up. I think that was like curious if you're still doing this kind of work.
Oh yeah,
so.
That's what I mean.
She's probably wondering if I'm back here hiding from our kids right now. So, you guys got anything else? Any questions? Burning questions?
Don't think so. No, this has been fun.
Yeah, we've been going a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize until I just looked down. It's almost
Yeah.
Almost 3 hours, huh?
The psychos are going to be impressed with this. That's what the modern sovereign guys, that's what they called our fans, are psychos.
Only the psychos will still be left this far into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to have one of them on to talk about the metaverse, because they're very big on it.
Well, they're
like
in
big
it.
positive.
They were born in it. They were molded by it.
They're bullish. Yeah.
Bullish on the metaverse.
Yeah.
We're talking bulls. They're talking bullish on the metaverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll definitely have to have one of them on. Yeah, be fun.
All right, guys, what do you think? We wrap it up?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wrap it up. Got my kids.
Yeah.
Speaking of that.
I got to take a leak like crazy.
Yeah,
so.
I'm same. I've drunk about 2 liters of water, and it's not. I don't have the sunshine to burn it off me. So, cool. Nice to meet you, Jesse. And
great meeting you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
This has been fun,
gentlemen. It has been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Likewise.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
I'm out.
See you later, guys. Bye bye.
All right.
Cool,
See you,
man.
Psycho.
See you later. See you later, Phil.
Oh, no. How's it
People
feel?
on the
Is it still natural?
psychopath. Finding the psychopath. No, that's getting weird.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I like it.
And even throwing physical in it just makes it sound even worse. So
Yeah.
I thought when I first started saying psychophysical, I was wondering, people think I mean, let's get psychophysical, like crazy physical, like no pain, no gain kind of thing. And then I thought, oh, fuck it, it's amusing. So
Yeah, they'll quickly learn.
they'll quickly learn, yeah.